We're coming to you live from my retirement community here in sunny Florida. Already I'm one sentence in and I've lied twice. Today it's gray. It's actually, by Midwestern standards, it's sunny, but it's not bright enough for me. I need more lumens. And it's not technically a retirement community, although there are dozens of us. Hi, how's it going? You've stumbled upon the podcast Breaking Change. It is a program hosted by Justin Searles, that's me, and usually, I like to say that I just cut one of these whenever I feel like, and it sure seems like I feel like doing it every other weekend. So it's become kind of a 2-week cadence. We did 26 regular shows plus one holiday special last year, and if you just take the number of weeks in a year and divide by 2, there you go. So here we are. It's February 1st. We made it through a whole month together somehow in 2025. I'm not a big fan of the odd numbered years, but I'm doing my best. Aren't we all? This episode, the breaking change that brings us together today, version 30 of the podcast, titled Mall of the Gulf of America. And that'll make sense in just a jiffy here when I catch you up on what's been going on in my life. So I turned 40 a couple weeks ago. My body immediately fell apart, and I felt very old. And so I wanted to go where old people go, and I booked a cruise. So Becky and I, because our birthdays are right smack, they're just 3 weeks apart. We're like, you know what? Let's just get right in the middle of there, right between our two dates, have a joint birthday celebratory cruise. And so that's what we did. And, I told a few friends, like, oh yeah, going on a cruise for my birthday. And they're like, oh my God, this is a big, huge vacation. What an ordeal. And I forgot that I've become spoiled again here in usually sunny Florida, that going to the port of Canaveral, is maybe it's about an hour or so from my home address. And that means it's just 20 to 40 minutes further than the airport, depending on traffic. So you pass the airport, and then instead of having like a nightmarish, just terrible experience waiting for 2 hours and, bopping through security and all that, you just kind of park in a parking garage and then just, because everything's digital now and whatnot, you just kind of like roll onto a boat. So it's a low key affair cruising when you live in most of Florida, but Orlando, I think, is the right distance from the ocean, all things considered, from a natural disaster and Florida people perspective. I like to keep a little bit of distance. I don't want to live in like New Smyrna or Cocoa Beach or Daytona. I'm sure they've got at least one great person in each of those towns. But now here, when you go on a cruise, there's kind of two kinds of cruises. There's the cruise to go and see something, and then there's the cruise to just not be home right now. And this was the latter. It was just a, simple doing a little, you're going in a circle almost all the time anyway, unless you're in some sort of repositioning cruise from the, a cruise ship's decided, sometimes cruise ships, they're autonomous vehicles. They just decide that like, oh, I'm all done. I'm sick of the Caribbean. I'm going to go and do some stuff in the Mediterranean now. And so like you might be able to book a repositioning cruise from one continent to another, which is less fun than it sounds because you're kind of just on the boat for a week or 10 days without a lot of places, if any, to stop and have excursions. And of course, the seas could be rough and all that. But no, this is just a simple 3-night weekend cruise with Royal Caribbean, which is just the absolute middle of the road cruise brand. It is nice, but it is not luxurious. It is, you're not going to have the Carnival poop cruises. I think that was Carnival. You're not going to have the boat just tip over or, total nonsense occur. But you're also, you're not on the Ritz-Carlton private yacht experience either. You get to see full-fledged Americans in all their glory, in all states of dress and undress. sober and inebriated. And we booked Royal Caribbean. So, like the point being, it doesn't like go anywhere. It goes to Nassau. And because they're all flagged in the Bahamas, one assumes that there's like some law or regulation that forces them to take port in Nassau. But, the State Department, as far as I know, still has a warning to Americans telling you, please don't go there. So we always stay on the boat in Nassau. So it's just kind of an extra day to be on the boat. And now, of course, all of the cruise companies have their own private islands that they have purchased or leased. Typically a Bahamian island. And for example, like Disney just released, I guess just opened their second such island up in North Eleuthera. So Disney kind of started the trend, but now, Royal has a Coco Key, but they pronounce it K and they spell it C-A-Y. If you're into nautical stuff, the word key is tricky. But the reason they pronounce it K is because their tagline is "Have a perfect day at Coco K," and this irritates me to no end. But I booked anyway, and because we're celebrating a milestone birthday, 40th birthday, it's a big one. I tried to convince Becky, hey, let's throw a big party and really do it. But like the social pressure of that, and then the goes intos of all of the coordination and stuff and the invitations and the event planning side of it. That's a lot of work. And if all we're celebrating is us and we don't matter that much, I feel like if I'm going to put the work into planning like a wedding scale event to do something, the level of investment is so high that I better be celebrating something more than my continued existence. So no, we decided to go on a cruise instead, but we did splurge because we got a suite. Normally we would just, do a balcony, normal stateroom, but nice because you get a balcony. So you can, if you're feeling claustrophobic, you can open the little port to the back, get some fresh air. Or if it's too hot and stuffy, which is often my concern. We got a suite, and once you decide you want a suite, then you have like 15 more decisions to make because there's different set like levels of suite. Do you want the royal suite, the very top of the top, where you have a butler and all that, and various extra amenities? Do you want just like a sky suite, like still a suite, still some amenities, but no included drinks package and all that? And the thing that sold me on the suite that we chose, it was one of the lower tier suites for whatever reason, was this like absolutely gorgeous. I mean, all right, I guess, I'm skipping a step because if you say like what cruise line you're going on, you got to say like what ship it is, right? Because some Royal Caribbean ships that are still sailing are like, damn near 20 years old, haven't been resold yet or what, maybe they've been retrofitted. And then some are brand new, and they're cranking out a lot of new ships right now. So this is the newest ship, Utopia of the Seas, and it is massive. And its massiveness has lent itself the ability to have like 18 fucking decks. And our suite was on the 18th deck because it was a 2-story loft, which I just thought was, because you think of staterooms, they're like tiny cabins, I do get a little bit claustrophobic. And I just heard that there's this 2-story, loft. The whole thing is just, it's a straight up just, it's not like some palatial thing where you're going to get lost in this, big labyrinthian suite. They've got those too, and they cost a lot more. This is just like you have a nice apartment or a flat or a loft in like Europe or in a real city. And so it feels like an apartment. And you go up the nice stairs and there's like a little curtain around the bed that you can open and close. TV that comes down from the ceiling with motors, which looks really cool in a video on YouTube and is less cool in practice when the remote control that does not illuminate. Its buttons just has mapped to it random A and B buttons that one is left to discover on their own is what makes the TV go up so you don't hit your head on it every fucking time you get out of bed. Like a lot of things in life, more money, more problems. So just being in a suite and figuring out how the fuck everything works, that's an hour of entertainment right there at least. I had a bathtub, which is nice because one of us likes taking baths. So anyway, we had a lot of fun. We got on the ship too early because being a suite guest, they let you board real fucking early. So we got on, and then we're like, nothing is available yet. Everything, they're still turning everything over. It's simultaneously chaotic from the perspective of the staff, and also a ghost town from the perspective of all of the kind of, guest facing amenities and stores and whatnot. But when I said Mall of the Gulf of America, it's because it really feels like you're at the Mall of America at sea. It's, of course, if you've seen the film WALL-E, these massive ships were meant to kind of mock cruising culture, like just the lazy, hedonistic, approach to living as you kind of just flit about pointlessly in this recreational lifestyle. It was that, right? It's every ship is like aiming to be that, like that's their goal, and that's why the entire concept is nonsense to me. But I like going to a mall every now and then. I like just having everything be a 3.5 to 4.0 star experience. I like things to be predictable and uncomplicated every now and then, because I have such a tremendous ability of making my own life unpredictable and overly complicated. So when I want to unwind, it's kind of nice just to be on autopilot. And we were walking around the ghost town for a few hours before our room was ready, before there was like anything open or anything to do. And we decided, well, let's go to the gym, because what else do we do? When you're, don't drink a lot, you don't eat very many times a day. Nothing else is really on in terms of entertainment. And also, like, you're not going to avail yourself of very much entertainment. You pretty quickly realize, like, oh, fuck, I am bored already. So we went to the gym / spa area. And of course, to get to the gym, you have to not only go through the spa, which, gyms don't generate revenue once you're on board, other than maybe group fitness training classes, but spas definitely do. And it's not any spa. It's not like you just kind of walk through a little hallway and then, you're in a gym. No, it's, you have to go through a gauntlet of, you're invited to take a tour of the spa, which Becky, who is, just 2 steps in front of me, she just very bubbly and, oh yeah, sure. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. And it was, if I'm going to try to be honest in this and not exaggerate or embellish, I want to say it was probably about a 10-minute compulsory tour from each of these little stations. So they had like when I say gauntlet, it was little alcoves of different people who were very excited to see us because we were the first people on this cruising. And they were bored, and they were just standing up with their sales pitch for why we should get micro-needled or why we need IV already, or different kinds of facials and all these other services. There was an acupuncture was, I think, the first stop, and it looks very nice, and I'm sure these are lovely people, but I think most of what they do is bullshit and just perpetuating terrible body image issues for mostly women, but kind of everybody. I just grinned and bared it. And we got to the end of that gauntlet, and we just said, okay, well, we prepaid for like the spa, like the hot, I want to say onsen, the saunas and the locker rooms there. So let's go to the locker room and change into our workout gear. Well, we're not done with the tour yet, because the tour concludes as we go through the fitness area. You realize, of course, no one's working out. And we ask, can we work out? And she's like, oh, well, the gym's not open. She said the gym's open from like 6 a.m. to 11. And I was like, great, we're inside of that range. And so we would like to use the gym now. And she's like, oh, well, you can't use the gym now. Like, maybe when we take off, which is like, it's like 11 a.m. and setting sail at 4 p.m. We're like, well, by then, what am I doing for 5 hours? So clearly, and we knew this going in. It's not the first time we've been on a cruise. Like, our just general lifestyle and way of being every day is kind of incompatible with what the point of cruising is. And we bend, but we will not break. So we just kind of kept marching down anyway and went downstairs and talked to the other lady and said, hey, we're going to use the locker. And then we used the locker, and then we went to the gym, and then we worked out. And it was, I'm learning, right, and I think we're all learning that just being confident, just being overconfident, brash, just walking around with bluster will basically always work in this current era that we find ourselves in. And while I'm a loudmouth, I'm not like naturally predisposed to that. I'm always worried about offending people. I'm worried about conflict. But increasingly, if and I learned this when I was in high school, because I used to go to a lot of concerts, and I had friends who were, real big concert people and indie music scene people. And so I would go to these, weird ass concerts. And like, I remember one was in a VFW hall in Allen Park, and like 30 people showed up. And, my friend was like, hey, do you want to meet the band? And I was like, I guess. She's like, just walk confidently back there. They had a little like prep area. It's hardly a backstage. It's a fucking VFW hall. And they, just walk back there confidently, like you're supposed to be there. And so I did it, and then I met the whole band. And then I went to like a lot of other concerts after that, and like I met a lot of my favorite bands, right? I remember like I walked up 5 minutes after a Decemberish show in college and just like shot the shit with Colin Malloy for 10 fucking minutes, because like he wasn't doing anything. Just same thing with like Death Cab for Cutie, all the early 2000s indie bands. So I've taken this, I've synthesized recently a new ideology for our current era, which is that being confident is better than being right, or at least more effective from the perspective of the person getting to be confident or presenting themselves as such. And yeah, I carry a lot of privilege, but like, what's the point of privilege if you're not going to cash it in? So walked right the fuck downstairs, was like, I'm going to use those lockers, use the lockers. And then she's like, oh, well, the gym's not open. I'm like, well, I'm wearing all this gym stuff. So fitness is about to happen. It can happen here. It can happen in the gym. You tell me. And just keep on walking. And then, you use the gym equipment, and no one says anything to you ever again. Just how you like it. So I remember as I was walking out after that workout, some couple, it's a couple of ladies, they were asking the staff, it's like, the woman says, like, I got like some sort of like flyer or some sort of marketing message telling me that I could receive a complimentary massage at the spa. And what is that all about? She's asking. And the staff says, oh, okay, well, the complimentary massage this is a direct quote. I wrote it down immediately. The complimentary massage is going to be just 1 minute on one shoulder. Now, I don't know. Everyone gets something different out of massages, no doubt. But whatever you get out of a massage, I am suspicious that you would be able to evaluate whether you're going to get the full value that you hope in, say, an 80-minute massage or an 120-minute massage out of just somebody kind of giving you a little Vulcan death grip just for, let's call it 45 seconds. Just over the shirt, I guess, right? Do I disrobe entirely for this complimentary massage? Do you oil me up? Should I shower first? Do I tip you for the complimentary massage? Like, how's like 75 cents? Does that sound good? So, the women walked out in disgust. And I have a feeling like that is an example of marketing that, probably backfires more often than it helps close the deal. That said, Becky saw another couple later on in the cruise who had just exited a massage. The couple were in the relaxation area, and they were just talking to each other apparently. And what are you going to do next? Oh, I'm going to get a facial. Oh, what are you thinking about tomorrow? I think I'm going to book another massage. And I was just like, man, like that's her. she had her own take, which is, if I recall correctly, like this is just a weird way to go about spending money. Like I guess it's kind of both. Well, hers was about time and mine was about the money side of it. Like, if you're going to go on a cruise and spend the entire time and sort of like, like, I'm sure that the spa is as good as a cruise ship spa can be, just like the food is as good as mid-tier cruise food can be. But if you're going to spend all weekend just doing the one thing, like if I just wanted to spend all weekend just eating, then I'd probably find, a Ponderosa or a Golden Corral or any of a number of, we actually have much nicer all you can eat play options here in Orlando. So it was just takes all kinds and all kinds of people occupy it. And that's what I mean. It's the Mall of America of the Sea. And people, and not everyone is super, even the frequent cruisers, not everyone's like super smart. I am super blessed because I have surrounded myself. I'm in a little bubble. I have friends like you listening to this program who are, of course, you are only the smartest, only the most intellectual and intelligent people would even think to listen to this. But I've curated a group of people who just have a very high level of baseline intelligence. And I have designed my life to avoid getting in close quarters too much with people who are trying to think of a euphemism, failing to think, what I'm talking about. There's a Royal Caribbean calls their internet service, which is probably some sort of Starlink satellite internet. They call the internet service package Voom, as in Zoom, but with a V. So like Voom. So Voom internet, you can prepay for this as part of your cruise as like a, package. You can also buy it on the ship. And the problem with buying stuff on ships, right, is like if you don't have cellular signal, how are you going to buy it? And they've actually figured this out many years ago. The answer to that is you open your phone or computer, you jump on the Wi-Fi, and then the Wi-Fi will say you don't have a package. And then you click a button and then you pay for a package. So you don't actually need to go to somebody to talk. Additionally, that whole first day, you're just at port. And once you leave port, even for a couple hours, you're just kind of following along the coast of Florida. So you're going to have intermittent signal, especially if you're, on the deck. And yet, there's a little stand of a person who sells Voom and does Voom sales for people. And it's right in the kind of main drag of the most mall-like part of it, with all the fancy luxury goods stores and the Rolex sales kiosk and stuff. And this line of people was never like shorter than 20 people for the entirety of the first day. Now, I hope some number of them were having, technical difficulty using their Voom package. But a lot of them, and I overheard a few people, were like just waiting to buy the Voom. And they were when I say that like the line was 20 people deep all day long, like, and I'm thinking about like a 3-day cruise, time is money. You're kind of just there, like, do what you want to do. If you want to go to the casino, whatever, like get the most out of it. Spending that time basically signing yourself up for an unnecessary sort of tech support or the slowest, like it's like people signing up for like, the New York Times by calling in and then like trying over a phone to spell out their credit card number. And then paying long distance because you're on a satellite phone on an airplane while you're doing it. It's I don't know, man. I like the feeling of being reminded of how blessed I am by how smart all my friends are. Like you, again. Thank you. One of the things that always throws me off whenever I'm on a cruise is my first drink. It was probably at 6 p.m. And I got the cocktail. I made friends with the bartender. I always tip aggressively. I front load my tips. That's a huge pro tip right there. Some people, they like to pay a big gratuity to their concierge or to their stateroom captain and all that. at the end to show express appreciation for the wonderful service that they received past tense. But I don't like to leave anything to chance, so I like to meet people up front and be like, here is $20. I think you're great. And then you make nice conversation, and then you make friends with the person, and then you get better drinks or better, housekeeping or whatever it is. And then do you tip them at the end, like when they give you the little envelope? Yeah, sure, you tip them at the end too, except this time when I totally forgot conveniently. But we left a really nice review. And we prepaid gratuities. It's another option that you can do. I don't know if they can see that, but regardless, got my first drink. And I hadn't even sipped it yet, and I started feeling real drunk. I was like, man, I'm not walking straight. And then I remembered, yes, this happens every time because the ship is moving. And and that sort of unsteadiness, like the light of feet, just feeling like a little bit, whoa, I'm struggling here to find my seat and sit down. It hit me hard. And I was like, oh man, like I'm on an empty stomach. That must be it. And then I looked at I think I had a salty dog or something. I was like, oh, I haven't taken a sip of you yet. I'm just motion sick or whatever. And when you realize like the modern cruise ships, if you're on like the 17th and 18th deck, you are really fucking high up. You're like quite elevated. And these new cruise ships, they're really wide, they're really big. They've got all of the sort of, they're designed not to be easy to tip, but they will sway. And that sway is going to be exaggerated the higher up you go, right? So being on the 17th and 18th, you get some real shaking from time to time if the weather's bad. Our second night, I want to say, like our bed was shaking so intently it was making a squeaking sound, as if somebody was fucking in our bed without our knowledge. I actually imagined like a dude behind me, because while I was trying to sleep, I just had this image in my head that I couldn't shake of like a dude behind me. I don't know if he was like a cat burglar who wasn't very good at stealing things, but was very good at creeping people out, just pushing on the bed, just pushing it, because it sounded and felt exactly like that's what was happening. And I suppose if I was in the loft of an 18 deck suite, so I'm one up from that, I'm on an imaginary 19th deck, which is pretty fucking high. So yeah. We also realized that going to celebrate as a married couple our 40th birthday together at the same time, right, meant that we would be going to 3 different restaurants, and they'd say, do you have anything to celebrate? And then we'd say, oh, well, we're both celebrating our 40th birthday because it's right here. And we'd explain, and people would be like, oh yeah, cute. And then they'd come out with, 2 individual desserts with the happy birthday written on it. And then they all want to sing. And we realized, oh my God, like we look like we were like, must have been twins separated at birth who then met in adulthood and married each other. Because it's just so fucking weird. So that made us really uncomfortable. It probably would have been, in hindsight being 2020, it would have been smarter maybe to go back and say, hey, honey, Friday night, that's your night. We're going to go out, get a nice steak, whatever you want to do. And we're going to celebrate just your birthday on the restaurant on Friday. And then Saturday, that can be my night. And then Sunday, we're just not going to say things. So anyway, that was fun. That was weird. If I, turn this into a cruise review, I would say that the suite tier on Royal Caribbean is definitely very, very nice. It's a cut above. You've got, lots of amenities. The support, the concierge people can make magic happen all the time, get you into any of the shows. And even if you don't have a reservation, you can basically, it actually is very well suited for the, just walk around like you own the place kind of bravado that I was also practicing exhibiting. But they have a lounge, right? They have a lounge that's both a really nice restaurant called Coastal Kitchen up there, and they have a just a place to hang out and hors d'oeuvres throughout the day and soft drinks and coffee and nice seating and a good view. But then they have kind of a happy hour where from like 5 to 8 p.m. or whatever you can get free drinks. And I have had this experience many, many times before where like when I was traveling for business a lot and I had the top tier status at all the hotel chains, I'd use so many points that I'd always get like the club floor or the executive floor, which would come with one of these lounges. You know, it's all the same basic rules. And because I was in maybe, you know, like the Park Hyatt in Hamburg or something, and I'd never been to the city before, but I'm in a Park Hyatt and it's gorgeous and everything's really nice and it's super luxurious. And I also have free access to like basically 3 square meals a day and all the drinks I can drink. Why would you leave? So then I'm like, why am I traveling the world just to kind of hop from, you know, luxury hotel lounge level to luxury hotel lounge level? Like that's, you know, A, it's expensive, and B, it's kind of a waste of time. And I caught myself on this trip doing the exact same thing because it's like, well, I could go to this restaurant and this bar, but that bar is really busy. And the one right here is actually like their best staff because it's their highest end customers, and the service is best. And also the booze is the best booze and the food is the best food. So why would I ever go? And now I'm just like, well, if I'm only going to just hang out in this one little 2-floor kind of bubble at the top of the ship, why did I make such a big deal about booking the biggest fucking ship in the planet? Yeah, so that remains a problem that I have not quite solved in my heart. The answer to the question, though, why get the biggest fucking ship, is they've got this aqua theater in the back where people like dive into swimming pools from obnoxiously high heights, and it makes your heart stop. And it is terrifying. And that was really cool. And they sang and danced to 80s songs. Because now that I'm 40, I'm just in the target demo of absolutely everything. And it feels really fucking weird when a deep cut from your childhood is just part of mainstream entertainment for everybody. But maybe the elder millennials will be like the boomers, and we will just continue to dominate culture until we are the last of us is literally dead. We'll see. Anyway, the suite level, in my experience, way better than the concierge tier of the Disney cruise ships. Disney has like a concierge level, and those were small in all the older ships, but the several newer ships, because Disney loves money so much, has a massive concierge level with tons of hotel guests. But because Disney loves money so much, doesn't have the proportionate number of extra concierge staff to actually support that many people, and so it's just not as nice. They're not able to move heaven and earth for you. There's not, you know, it's very nice. Don't get me wrong. I had a great experience, but I feel like Royal does classism better, I'll say. So if that's what you're into, you know, check it out. You know, I mean, for me, 2 days into something like this, I'm not good at being idle. I'm not, my favorite thing in life, I hate to say it, is probably productivity and doing cool shit. And that sucks because when you're trying to relax, you're almost definitionally not doing cool shit. And I found myself getting really antsy as a result. So I was ready to come home probably day 1.5, just so I could get my computer and crank out some stuff. So that's pretty much what I did. Any other cruise things before I leave you? Oh, one is elevators. Like, this is not a cruise specific phenomenon, but you know, in large hotels in the last 5-6 years, you know, there's been the trend of having a tablet or something on a pedestal next to the elevator bank that'll ask you to tap it and tell it what floor you ultimately want to go. And then you'll tap, say, floor 14, and then it'll say walk to elevator A. And then you go to elevator A, and then you get on that elevator, and then it takes you eventually to that floor. This, this ship had tons of elevators, and so it needed a system kind of like that to try to, you know, route people efficiently. And the system worked, but the people just couldn't handle it. Even I was seeing people on day 3 who clearly did not know about the tablets, but they were using the elevator. And the answer to the question of how the fuck are they using the elevator is that they were using it like a hop-on, hop-off tourist bus. And they were just living in this mystery of not knowing, of like, hey, isn't it funny that the elevator just stops on random floors? And then they would get off when they were, you know, closest to, you know, Price is Right rules the floor that they wanted to be on, and then they'd get off and they'd either walk a story or they'd hop on the next bus. So that's I don't know that I recommend anything I do to anyone ever, but you know what? We're making memories, so that's fun. So speaking of memories, let's talk about things we've talked about before in follow up. This is probably the third time that I've brought to you the fact that I've been struggling with my little gaming handhelds. I had a Steam Deck, and then I got cold feet. Well, it had an issue. I returned it. I got a second Steam Deck, and then I got a ROG Ally because they were on sale. And I was like comparing them, and then I put Windows on the Steam Deck. I'm like, what's the best one to use? And I settled on return everything, keep the second Steam Deck, and then do a hard reset to just have it be a normal SteamOS ass Steam Deck, just to play games, no Windows, no fuss, because it just works. And, PC gaming, playing games on a Windows computer is, you have access to more things, you have more freedom, but you pay a tax of it never fucking works. And I can pay the it never fucking works task when I'm at a computer with a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse anytime I want. Oh, well, maybe I'll fuck around with the drivers or this setting or whatever. And it's not as bad as it used to be, but at least I'm equipped to deal with it. It'll take 15 minutes and then I'll go play my game. But when you're like Steam Deck is in Windows and you double tap a thing with your thumb, or with moving the mouse cursor around with an analog stick, and then you press like the R2 shoulder button to click, and then nothing fucking happens, or it launches the game and then it goes and quits on a black screen. What are you gonna do? Like, the answer to that question was literally plug in. I had like a KVM, a USB-C KVM, like a keyboard switching thing with other USB-A ports on it, and then I was unplugging my mouse and keyboard from my computer and plugging it into that so that I could then hold my Steam Deck in my lap while I have a wireless keyboard also in my lap while I'm staring at it and mousing around. And I just, I realized I'm being foolish. I'm going to just let my game machine be a game machine. And if I can't play every kind of game from every store, you know what? What's wrong with me? So I've settled in. And I'm very glad of my decision. And of course, when something slightly faster than the Steam Deck gets announced a month from now, I'm going to be pretty pissed. So there you go. Let's see. This is going to be the only other item of follow-up. I'm going to take a deep swallow here. Okay, deep breath, shallow swallow for anyone keeping score at home. Boy, I've talked about, a couple times going to pick up Jeremy's Tesla. That experience being suboptimal in several ways. We ended up sitting around for a few hours. Partly our fault for not knowing exactly how to handle that right, but partly because they're not good at what they're doing. I talked recently about how I had a sort of the Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus, religious experience when Jeremy's Tesla drove me home safely along the deadliest stretch of highway in the United States. And how that made me at least respect it. And be like, okay, I can see this full self-driving thing, supervised. It's as long as you're hyper vigilant, right? And you treat it like now we're a team and you're both working on this, it can work really well. Of course, like Alza just discussed about, intelligence levels and people who have different levels of awareness and metacognition about their life. Like there's a lot of people, like the people using the elevators on the cruise ship, who I would not trust with the responsibility of monitoring and keeping an eye on and supervising their car. But for me, as me, an intelligent man, person, sorry, my gender is not the reason that I'm smarter than most people. But as me, a smart person, I'm confident I'm going to be like, pins and needles and terrified of this thing killing me. So I'll be paying attention. Don't worry. And, Becky and I talked about it. We talked about it again. And we feel like absolute just assholes because There is nothing else on the market. If what you want is a car that basically drives you down these particular areas that are a problem and a huge pain in our life, to the point that we don't even go to that side of town, even though it's where like supposedly all the good restaurants are, and there's really nice people, and apparently Carrot Top lives over there too, which is just, nothing but pluses apparently on that side of town. I wouldn't know it. In fact, I've developed a prejudice against those people because I don't want to drive there because it's terrifying. And so here I live in Orlando, but I'm only in this one good part, and there's other good parts. And it's because I'm scared of driving there that I don't go. So we have this very specific problem, and there is nothing, absolutely fucking nothing on the market that can help us with that problem. Like, short of, there's probably a pill. There's probably a pill. Okay, there's a pill that could probably help me loosen up. But I don't know if I could take enough of it and also still be legally competent to drive a car. So we fucking bought a Tesla. There it is. I said it. I'm now, Justin got red pilled. I'm canceled. Elon is a huge fucking twat. Don't get me wrong. Some of the people, but not most of the people at Tesla are huge fucking twats. I would say they're hardworking people who have a dick of a grand boss somewhere up the org chain, and he mostly causes problems. And they would probably say it more if it didn't mean that they would lose their livelihood and or green card or not green card, H-1B visa. So I don't feel good about that. The politics of it suck. It's, I want the company to suffer. But I don't now, because now I'm invested, because I wanted to get software updates forever. So here's the pickle I'm in. The truth of it is, as I get older, I focus on the things that are in my control, and the things that are in my control are like, I need to buy a car. I'm going to buy the car that is the best tool for the job, all things considered. And there's a million downsides and a million risks that are associated with Tesla specifically that I worry about and that I've been dunking on left and right for years. So don't get me wrong. Like, I've taken those into account here, but I'm inclined to just do whatever works best for me as an individual, and then vote for and support whatever works best for America and the world, collectively. And that's, the separation of an individual level concern and an aggregate level concern is something that I have always been very comfortable with, because it's something that my statistics teacher in sophomore year of high school drilled into our heads. Maybe freshman year? I don't know. I took a statistics elective in high school, and it was very formative because she was like, most of the things that most of the people seem to be worried about all the time. This is shortly after 9/11. No, it was actually before 9/11. Well, kudos to Miss Jonick. Yeah. Kick ass. Anyway, most of the things that most people are worried about all the time are actually, they're expressing an individual reaction to an aggregate level concern. Like, for example, how your aunt wouldn't fly on a plane for 3 years after 9/11 because she'd get 9/11'd, right? Even though we all know that, like, intellectually, statistically, far more likely to die driving in the car marginally more than going to the airport and getting on a plane. So I'm, willing to separate those two things to a point where it's almost instinctive to me. And a lot of people don't like that, right? We vote with, where do we spend our time? We vote in, and I think if you engage with like social media a lot, like if you're in an app and that app is owned by somebody who you do not support and you do not like, and your presence in the app is just making them money, and that they have knobs, they've got a big racist dial in the back, and they're constantly watching the audience reaction like it's a fucking game show to see is like riding that line to get the right amount of outrage, but not too much outrage that people quit. If you're in one of those apps, which is, I think, where we hear the most of people complaining, because again, outrage is what drives engagement, and engagement drives ad sales, and ad sales perpetuates all of these social networks. Yes, I totally get you spending time there is you voting with your eyeballs to support something. Because it's a product that actually has utility in the world. and there's no alternative. I feel less bad about that than I would feel about being like an X user and on X, right? Or even, frankly, being an Instagram user and on Instagram and scrolling through reels and seeing ads, right? Or on TikTok or any of these. So anyway, all that to say is if you're mad about this, I'll just request you to please provide, a detailed list of everything that you do and say in your life and all the things that you buy and where your time goes. Send me a screenshot of your screen time, and then I'll find something to get outraged about something you do that somehow presents a contradiction or a little, sprinkle of hypocrisy in how you live your life, because we're in this super fucking complicated world that just is run by the same 5 tech moguls. And if you don't, sign up to the right combination of absolutely every single little startup out there, you're going to find out that like somebody's got a subcontractor that actually is like, a cousin of a guy who worked at Palantir once. And now that means that you can't go to dinner with Lynn anymore. So I don't know, man. We bought a Tesla. Specifically, getting to the meat of the issue, we bought a Model Y. The Model Y is the highest volume product that Tesla sells. And it's also got the highest safety rating. And the reason that is attractive to me is that when you buy the highest volume product, they have to work out a lot of the QA and quality shit that like the first Cybertruck owners are basically beta testing like a thing that doesn't work. That's had to have like, I'm sure there's like a dude named Steve who's been responsible for hammering like some particular part in place and at the very end of the assembly line. But if you're doing like 200,000 Cybertrucks, like they would need to actually work the kinks out. So the reliabilities of the Model Y generally is higher. The safety scores are very, very high. That is nice to know. It's also, there's a virtue in buying the highest volume product on the market. And because the Model Y specifically is like one of the best selling vehicles in the nation, there is there's a fan base, and there's like sort of a standardization around it. Even though there's many model years and refreshes, there's, a cottage industry of people who sell, say, mud flaps that are perfectly fit just for the Model Y chassis, or seat, covers, not seat covers, like alternate floor mats that are perfectly just trimmed to fit the Model Y just so, all sorts of little like, conveniences that I don't have to figure out. Oh, how am I going to mount my phone to the edge of the display or something so it's hands-free, but it's still charging and I'm not like, looking at it. And the answer to that is there are multiple products. There's like 5 different people who make just a MagSafe charger thing that clips on seamlessly to that particular tablet, right? I don't have to jury rig some other thing around it. So buying the high volume product, and this is the exact same reason why the Steam Deck is so cool, because the Steam Deck is just like the most popular one of those, and I can just buy it, and then I can Google Steam Deck space GameCube emulation. And then there's 55 fucking YouTubes that are between 1 minute and 3 hours long. So it's just like a complimentary massage in that way. The 1 minute one leaves you wanting more, or just wanting to close the tab and move on. But at the end of the day, there's a site that will show you, hey, click this one button and you'll get exactly what you want on your Steam Deck because it's the thing all of us have. And if you had some other thing that no one else had, like, for example, when I met Becky back in yonder 2003, the iPod was a thing, but I was intent on owning the better for technical reasons because I could play Og Vorbis and it had like a higher capacity or whatever the fuck. Rio Karma. And it had a little nipple on it. And it came with a lot of cool songs of artists that I'm really glad that I eventually listened to. But like when it broke, there was no solution. And I went through 3 or 4 of them because they were trash, it turned out. And even though I loved it and I had a huge affinity for it, and I was like, fuck Apple, I don't want anything to do with iPod and that cult and all that. I since redeemed myself, and I still pay penance to Apple every year for saying the things I said about it in high school. But, once I got into the iPod cult, I was like, holy shit, there's a whole cornucopia of products that are just for me. And the iPhone is the same way. I'm sure if you buy an Android phone that is anything other than a Pixel or a Samsung Galaxy. Any other product probably, oh, well, that's the case. There is one case for this product, right? That's, anyway, the Model Y as high volume was why it was the most appealing to us. It's also cheaper. So the fact that it's like the lower tier, the 3 and the Y are the lower tier, the entry level normal ass cars, and then the X and the S are the luxury branded. But if you really believe that you're just getting a tablet on wheels and all that really matters is what kind of computer's inside of it, well, the computer inside the Model Y that I bought is the same one that's in the Cybertruck. And so if they're going to really care about those Cybertruck customers for a long time, they're going to have to keep supporting that particular hardware, which means the full self-driving will work just as long as it does on the Cybertruck, right? So I, feel good about that. And then, I can feel better if I replace it in 2 years with a better piece of hardware, Anyway, we didn't buy new, we bought certified pre-owned or CPO. And I was skeptical of buying new because the fit and finish, the number of times I've talked to a Tesla owner who's like, oh, I love this thing, it's so amazing. And I'm like, so when you drive on the highway, does it whistle? And they're like, well, yeah, okay, there's a little bit of gap in between the window and whatnot, but I'm getting it fixed. And they're almost got it. I was like, when you open the door, is there like a rattle, like something that's like broken glass is just inside there, just hanging out? Well, yeah, okay, sure, there is that. When you buy certified pre-owned, 2 things have happened. One, somebody else drove it off the lot first and then had to call the service department and get it taken care of, like get all those kinks ironed out for you. And 2, Tesla themselves in the recertification process, that's why it's called a certified pre-owned, where they refurbish it and they clean it up, that it means that there's actually somebody whose job it is to inspect the vehicle for quality before they hand it to me. And it's apparent that like they could use that extra check. So CPO on its own, I'm pretty sure ours is going to have like 1,100 miles on it, when it's delivered. It's barely been used. Somebody owned it for 2 months. Like, I am very excited about that, right? It's going to feel like a new car, except it's going to have somebody kick the tires first and make sure it works well. And I'm sure there's going to be problems, but I have to imagine there's going to be fewer problems than if I'd paid, almost twice as much for the new Model Y that literally got announced the day that we bought this one. Because that new one is going to be the first of its kind off the assembly line. All extra kinks. You get bonus kinks built into your car, and you paid an extra $20,000 for it. So I feel pretty good. We got a good deal. Now, when I tell friends, my cool hip friends are immediately like, "Yeah, I couldn't live without CarPlay though," and that's me too. I felt that way pretty strongly. I live and die on CarPlay. I love CarPlay. I spent most of my car hunt in 2020 looking for a car based solely on its CarPlay capability. Like, how big is the screen? How good? How fast is it? How reliable is the CarPlay experience? I love the CarPlay implementation in my Ford Escape. Get into one of these Teslas and I'm immediately skeptical. And for me, when you think about what do I get out of CarPlay that I really like, and if you're not familiar with what CarPlay is, I don't know how you're listening to this, but you're here. Hello. It is the projection system from iPhone into cars' infotainment systems. And there are wired and wireless variants. I have always preferred wired because there's less latency and you're charging the phone anyway. So you take your phone out, you plug it in, and you can tap a doodle all over the screen, and you can do your navigation that way, and you can check your messages. And it's designed to be very functional, cover a wide breadth of functionality across mostly, audio playback, messaging, and maps. But with a keyboardless UI that's designed to be just a couple taps and then get your eyes back on the road. I think it's very well designed, and I use it for those purposes. Most of the time, it's podcast or music plus maps plus messages, and the 3 most recent of each of these categories, 3 most recently used apps are kind of pinned to the left side, which is nearest the hand of the driver. And what I realized as soon as I got into the Tesla and set up my own profile is that they have what sure as shit look like Apple developed apps because the interfaces are fucking identical for podcast and music. You just scan a QR code and then it authenticates and authorizes the car to play your podcast and your music. And because the Teslas are always online, it's actually, synced with your play state and whatnot. You don't even, if you forget your phone for whatever reason, and you can use the watch, by the way, like as a key now, as of recently. So you can use, like, I could actually travel without my phone and be listening to my Apple podcasts while driving. So that's nice. So like the podcast and music apps are really good. And that's one of the three things that I need CarPlay for. The second one is Maps, because I like Apple Maps more than Google Maps. And I would definitely like either of them more than I'd like some random Honda or Toyota Navi system. But the thing about not just electrics, it's somewhat electrics, because you want the electric vehicle to be able to reroute itself based on where's the nearest charger at, or interrupt a long road trip by interspersing chargers when you need them, and then dynamically updating that, which is hard. That dance is theoretically possible with CarPlay as it exists, but none of the makes actually do it right. And your best bet is kind of just looking for stops manually. And now you're touching the screen a lot, and then you're like, well, I hope this charger works with my car, and I hope this one's not broken. And so there's no kind of like live state that the chargers are good. Whereas if you're using Tesla's map, it will just route you, and it'll literally tell you everywhere you're going when you give it a destination. It'll give you all the routing information. It'll tell you, hey, you're charging here from here to here for this many minutes. And then at the very end, it'll say like your ETA as well as what your battery level will be at when you arrive at the destination. And that's a level of integration you just probably could not feasibly get with how the various makes are approaching Apple and CarPlay, because they want to turn all their cars into platforms, and it's seemingly inevitable. So I'm resigned to the fact that for that feature alone, but even more so with full self-driving, now it's like, if my job is to supervise that this car isn't going to drive me into a lake or hit a child on a trike, I need to be looking at the road, looking around me, seeing what it's doing. But also the screen in the center, every time the turn signal turns on, a huge fucking portion of that screen now is showing that blind spot camera. So I can look at the camera, make sure everything looks kosher, and I can always hit the brake. But additionally, the map itself, inside the map UI, will render little people, right? That the computer vision sees, and cars and other obstacles. And that can be a visual confirmation that, yes, the car does also see that thing that I see. So I can move forward with that knowledge based on depending, I'll interpret what the car does based on my knowledge of whether or not I know that it's seeing that thing. And so that's a really handy thing that you wouldn't have in a third-party map. The only other thing is really messages. And to be honest, I've caught myself, even using dictation, getting sucked into pointless iMessage conversations because I'm just bored using CarPlay, where I'll see the little red dot next to the messages, I'll tap it, and then I'll click to listen to a message, and then I'll try to mutter out a reply to Siri, and then it'll get it wrong, and I'll click change, and then I'll click cancel, or I'll click away from if you click away from the little modal dialogue because you didn't like it how it transcribed you, it'll actually fucking send that message anyway. So then I've got oh shoot, I'll check on my watch while I'm driving and say, oh fuck, it did send that stupid message. And then I'm back in the CarPlay and clicking on it. Sorry about that. I actually didn't mean to call you that word. I was just talking to my car. You know how it is. But now I'm super distracted because I'm using two extremely inefficient tools to try to actively text with people, when the answer to the question is I probably just should not be actively texting with people while I'm driving. And so far, every time I've been in the Tesla, I've turned on the do not disturb while driving, and it uses the motion detection to figure out whether I'm driving. And I just haven't texted with people because I've been too focused on making sure that this tin can isn't going to careen me into, a lake. So those are my experiences so far. I've not picked it up yet. Maybe we'll have a whole episode whenever the fuck this thing shows up, and I can talk about how that was a goddamn fiasco. And then I get to my house and it's you take the baby home from the hospital and you're like, you know what? I don't want this one. I want a different one. Right? Or maybe I don't want one at all. And that's why I didn't have kids, because I was pretty sure that's how I was going to feel coming back from the hospital. And if you think that, no, every dad doesn't feel that way, first of all, a lot of dads do feel that way and they just don't tell you about it. And secondly, I think that you don't know me very well, because I would 100% return that baby to the baby store. Yeah, I would 100% is a high number. I would 80% take the baby back to the baby store if I could. And that's why I just didn't go to the store in the first place. I was like, I got other stuff to do. Aaron pointed out when I was chatting with him, the biggest miss on the Tesla is that when you don't have CarPlay and you're not using the Apple Maps app, you can't just tap your ETA to somebody really easily. So share ETA is a feature that a lot of people don't take advantage of. But if you're going to go meet somebody, or if you're on your way home and somebody like Becky's trying to time dinner prep, she'll get first a notification and then a live activity of like where I am, how many minutes away I am. And then every time I get hung up or delayed significantly, she'll get an extra message saying, hey, Justin's new ETA is this. And I could theoretically grab my phone and still send that ETA to her. But then I would need to put in my destination duplicatively on the phone as well. So that is a bummer. That is for sure. That is a just clean miss. And it's something that I've been trying to use more and get in the habit of. So that's one thing that sucks for sure. That's something going into this that I know sucks. That would be a downgrade. But otherwise, all I see really is upside. Easier to maintain vehicle. I don't have to go to a dealership far, far away every time I need an oil change. I also don't need oil changes anymore. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you'll be happy for me, even though this means I'm going to super extra hell and not just the regular hell that I'd previously signed up for. And thus concludes follow-up. If you're not familiar, the next thing we do is we enjoy a joke from our friend Aaron Patterson. The joke isn't the good kind of joke, it's the other kind of joke, and that is that he wrote a pun for us. And I've been staring at the little squiggles of his invisible ink all fucking afternoon. Let's scroll up. Now recall, Breaking Change, Season 2, we've only had 2 puns so far. And we've got to figure out, where does this one fit in the family? The third child thing? Is it going to be mom's new favorite? Probably not. But it's the baby. Gotta love it. Or take it back to the baby store. So, I heard most cars are designed by a steering committee. All right. So, all right, I'll read that one more time because I just went right the fuck in. I'm opening the envelope now. Play the music. All right. I heard most cars are designed by a steering committee. This is, I'm trying to get inside Aaron's head right now. If we scroll down to Breaking Change Season 1 and we look at the lowest, the bottom of the food chain, because he and I re-ranked all these and we found consensus. Out of 26 puns, the 4th worst pun had the term steering committee in it. And the reason it was bad was it was really fucking long and it was hard to follow. And it was I think it used the phrase steering committee twice. Yes. So not only that, he used it twice and there was no payoff. Here, he's trying to redeem himself. That's what he's doing. I guarantee it. That or he just uses that fucking phrase a lot, which would be weird. I guess he does a lot of open source stuff and he's in a lot of core groups. I heard most cars are designed by a steering committee. Aaron, this is undoubtedly better than the last time you made a steering committee pun. Now, let's see how it ranks. Is this better than the current number 1 pun? Which is, I bought a Nintendo Switch because I heard it will be... There's a typo in this one. I'm going to fix the typo. I'm not even going to put sick afterwards. Sick typo, brah. I bought a Nintendo Switch because I heard it was going to be really fun to play. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it one bit, and now I feel like I've been Joy-Conned. See, I even got a chuckle out of me for that. I don't think it's better than that one. I'm not chuckling at this one because this is so by the numbers. This is just this is very close to Laffy Taffy territory because it doesn't pull in any other information. It's just, this is wordplay. Here it is. Signed, sealed, delivered. All right, so it's not better than number 1. Is it better than this year's number 2 pun? And that pun reads, I was really hoping to play Balatro today, but I don't have time, so I guess it's not in the cards. And that one does pull in something else. It pulls in a game called Balatro, and you gotta have to know what that is. So there's making something relevant by tying it to some outside thing. And then there's going so far, so obscure that you actually risk confusing the audience. And I play tested this pun in real life, the Balatro one, with a couple people. And 2 of the 3 had not heard of Balatro, meaning it was too deep of a cut for a lot of folks. Now I imagine, like, the very intelligent people who listen to this podcast, like several of you probably hadn't heard of Balatro, but probably more than what would like a general population average work out to. At the same time, I think this one's going to age better, especially in the context of me complaining about my fucking car. And the fact that the car company that I'm buying it from has I wouldn't even say benevolent dictator, a dictator at the top. And just even if it is designed by committee, if somebody were to admit that, he'd be like, no, I designed every fucking screw, hammer, and nail. All right. So that means that this is the new number 2 pun for season 2. I heard most cars are designed by a steering committee. Straight, simple, to the point. All right. Thank you, Aaron, for your time. And now, if you will, let's get to the news. I've handpicked, curated quite a selection of little newsy morsels for you today. It's been an interesting month in tech news. Obviously, new presidential administration affects a lot of stuff. There's a lot's gone on, and a lot has been beaten to death already. And so I'm trying to just pick out a few of my favorite little things that made me say, or things that confirmed my biases, in which case I said, yeah. One of those is the first. We'll start with one of the latter kind. So Resident Evil 2 was remade a couple years ago. The game was originally late 90s PlayStation game. They made it a modern multi-platform third-person action adventure, horror game. And great graphics and really good reviews. And I'm pretty sure that was the one that had like this creepy dude who just followed you all the time. I think his name was like Mr. X. Maybe it was like if it was, that's like maybe a metaphor for social media networks. And Elon just kind of skulking over you like the fucking, the beagle, like Snoopy, over his little doghouse, just kind of leering at you. Anyway, Mr. X would just he'd walk into the room, and if you didn't successfully, sneak around him, he'd fuck your shit up. He was it was an instant kill, and there's nothing you could do about it. Just terrifying. Anyway, so game had great reviews, sold really well. Then it released on the iPhone, probably following an announcement at an Apple event, because Apple's clearly been paying Capcom to port games. They did this with Resident Evil Village. I think they've done it another time too. And it was originally at some teaser rate, $10, $15, or maybe it was like an in-app purchase unlock. So it was relatively affordable. Because the same game was $70 at launch and probably still $30, $40 on other platforms. So you'd think that the phone, which is, more powerful than just about every other portable gaming system in absolute terms. Of course, it doesn't have a fan. It's not clocked like a Steam Deck, but it's really impressive silicon in there. And the news a while ago had been that these games don't sell well. On the order of fewer than 10,000 copies. And that's in this article I'm going to link to from Video Games Chronicle. And sure, that's not a lot, right? It's you think of the billions of iPhone users out there, you think you got on stage with Apple, you ported this big game, and if only a few thousand people bought it, it's probably not worth your time. And it's clearly the market sending a signal. We don't want to play AAA video games that typically require a controller on shitty touch controls. And we also don't want to be connecting, whether it's one of those clamshelly kind of controller cases onto our phone or using one with Bluetooth on our phone. And when it comes to iPad or whatever other device, Mac, like there's just better ways to play games in those form factors. So you'd think that was all the story. But that initial price was just a teaser rate. The real price for the game was $40. And when Capcom increased the price, the normal standard sale price, to $40, that's what they wanted to sell it for. A real game. You buy the game once, and you get to play it forever. Or at least until they stop updating it and it becomes incompatible with a future version of iOS. But you own it forever, for good. A license to that version of the game that doesn't work anymore someday. Well, that someday might come sooner from a post-launch support perspective, because the news here is fewer than 200 people bought it. Like enough. I've given conference presentations to groups much larger than 200 people. I graduated high school with almost twice as many people as this. My company, that I co-founded, while I was working there day in, day out, we were, already on a trajectory to be 200 people. That's a small group of people. That's not, you take 200 times 40, and that's like not going to move the needle in your quarterly results. Well, it will move the needle. It moves it down, straight down. So that is just a sign of exactly how weird the gaming market currently is, because iPhone, like Apple, is making more money off video games than any video game maker on the planet, because they get a 30% cut of all of the nonsense, casino games that happen, gacha games and in-app purchases and all that stuff that people are voting with their thumbs that's what they want. And it's the most powerful device and all that, but you try to go out market and you try to do you just try to do something nice for somebody, and then they just shut you down and they go play Candy Crush. So that does not bode well for any of the current trends that we're talking about in gaming changing anytime soon. Speaking of Apple, one of the betas apparently leaked. I'll post to the 9to5 Mac story. 18.3. Which just released for iOS. It has, somebody found some code, I don't know if it's decompiled or if it's constants and stuff, but they saw a reference to a new app that's not yet released or announced called Invites, and a new framework and a corresponding daemon for that framework called GroupKit. The thinking here is Apple might release a new app called Invites, and that Invites app would be used to create calendar events. And honestly, if you use Apple's stock calendar app, which I do, you will know that creating new calendar events, even just solo ones for yourself, is kind of a pain in the dick. Like, it's not a good UI. Like, I was at the dermatologist the other day, and I've got, I'm at the checkout, and I've got my annual, annual skin check, which is one of the things that when you move to Florida, they send you a gift basket, and it's like, and by the way, you have to go to the dermatologist at least once a year for the rest of your life, or you will die. So I'm at my annual skin check, and I am at the checkout, and she's like, do you want to schedule next year's? And I'm like, sure, why not? Otherwise I'll forget. So I'm scheduling next year's. I'm like, all right, it's January, and scrolling to get all the way there. Go hit plus, create a new date, realize that doesn't help. So I got to go and do the little, little spinny doos that you do in the date picker and iPhone. And then I'm typing it in, and usually it'll remember previous events, like if I say annual dermatology, it'll come up and pre-populate. But then it didn't do that. So I had to type it in and put it in the map location. That's all fine. That's no big deal. But what I'm saying is, calendaring is really difficult, because the number of pieces of data that you need, and that you need them all to be correct and only at that one point of entry, or else you're fucked. On a phone screen is just hard. It's just hard, and that's what it is. And no calendar app does it really, really well. But this is a great example of how something like natural language and AI is helpful. And the very first natural language thing Apple ever released was the little plus button in Calendar for Mac way back when. This is like, gosh, 2008, 2009. Had you hit the plus button and in a natural language, you can type something kind of sort of like a sentence, and it would pre-populate a new calendar event. That's hard. What's really fucking hard is when you're using an iCloud calendar, which is not tied to your Gmail, and you want to invite literally anybody to a multi-person event. And I'm sure that all the Apple people, because they don't use Google Workspace, right? Like they've got all of their own backend. All of those Apple people who are like ever having to make any event with any friends in their life who use Gmail for their calendar, or any company stuff, like if they're dealing with a vendor or whatever, none of them are going to be using iCloud Calendar. And it sucks, right? Like you now have this additional layer of needing to know all of the email addresses and punching them in just so, and marking them each as optional or whatever you can do in that UI. It gets now even just putting in the fucking event, the lady was getting tired of me still standing there, while I was waiting to pay. She was waiting for me to pay. So I think that Apple probably internally they know that this UI isn't great, and that adding more shit to the calendar app is probably not the solution to the problem. And additionally, having everything be negotiated over CalDAV, which is intrinsically tied to your email address, like the invite system, doesn't play to their strengths, because it's a kind of identity that like people don't live by. Everyone's got an Apple ID. That means everyone has an Apple email address. But if you don't use it for email, and it's not the email that you give out to people, then using it for calendaring is just, it adds extra friction, because, I didn't see that because it was over here. I don't know. I didn't recognize that email address. So I didn't click accept, or it didn't come through the tube properly. And so Google Calendar has like a real advantage in that if you're both on Google Calendar, you just click accept and then instantly it's all updated from their perspective. So having an Apple specific invites app to provide, and you think in terms of Apple intelligence, now it's maybe a really intelligent way to get these invites set up with multiple people, maybe creating just like Doodle did or Straw Poll, or, it was the idea, I'm sure, when they were designing those little apps that live inside of iMessage, I'm sure they were thinking somebody will make an app where you can just have like a group chat and say, hey, make a new event. And then like everyone would pick what days work for them or what hours work for them. And they create a poll to determine when the best time for this meeting is, and then get agreement that way and find consensus. Now, the Doodle app, because that's not a product, that's a feature, eventually like started charging for all kinds of ridiculous shit, like editing your choices. And it's not really usable, right? And the software is old and it's crappy. And there's other, third-party things that try to do this. And recently, what is it? CardHop or Fantastical. Fantastical has like a subscription service now where they provide one of those, just like Calendly or whatever, like, hey, book something on my calendar, and it's a web interface and it creates all this stuff in the background, sort of saves this particular step. But still, nothing's really good for groups. And you could imagine Apple's, taking that frustration and being like, we could do something that would actually be really, really nice and integrate with all of our other shit really well, and actually get the monkey off our back that like inviting people from an Apple calendar is a bad experience for the person sending it, and confusing for the person receiving it if they're not also, dyed in the wool iCloud all the time people. This is supported by the fact that this Daemon group kit seems to be creating some sort of new database or data structure for groups. Similar, what I suspect is going to happen is it's going to extract or formalize your group chats in iMessage, because that's the primary thing right now. It's like you got a group of friends called Wolfpack in iMessage. It's got these 7 dudes in it, right? And if that becomes an Apple group, then that awareness of that group could migrate to other parts of the system. Like, for example, inviting to an event, or finding a day that works best for an event. That makes perfect sense, right? That group could also be like somebody you could just send an email to. And so in the mail app, then you could just say, hey, send this email to Wolfpack. And it'll create sort of a pseudo mailing list on the fly. You could imagine if if Game Center ever took off, and it's not going to, but I'm sure Apple will add it to the Game Center support. So you can have just like, just play Need for Speed, some really shitty version of like that car racing game for 12 years ago. And you can invite all your friends from the Wolf Pack simultaneously. So I think that's where they're going here. And I don't think any of that's going to amount to a hill of beans, except for this Invites app. And to accomplish that the way that they would want to, having a concept of a group that isn't getting entered into the Invites app would make sense. And to get those groups, it's going to come from iMessage. So that's, as a new kind of top level data structure in what will be iOS 19, I think this makes perfect sense, right? Just like we have your contacts are kind of like a system-wide service. Your photos, of course, are treated like a system-wide service. So are your files now. They've been very judicious in not adding more of this stuff, but I think it makes perfect sense. So we'll see what it is. So I guess that you can register that as my prediction. Also in Apple news, they reportedly canceled the AR glasses that you didn't know about. There have been several rumored augmented reality glasses that Apple's supposedly cooking up. One of them has been just like the idyllic form of, hey, we've got wireless AR glasses that are just like the Vision Pro. They're everything that thing isn't. And it's got all the functionality except without the ski goggles and without the kind of fake VR nonsense built in. And that, everyone knows, is at least 10 years out. There's no way that's coming anytime soon. We just saw Meta demo this $10,000 prototype that would never be able to go to market. And probably not even be that useful. And still would require a little computing puck that it would have to communicate with wirelessly. Well, Apple, I vaguely remember this rumor coming up at some point or other, had an AR glasses project that would have to be tethered to the Mac. And so originally it was going to be tethered to the phone, except then it would just drain your phone's battery immediately. So the idea was it would be tethered to a Mac. And one assumes maybe this is why Mac Virtual Display on Vision Pro has gotten so much investment and was like a top level feature. Maybe the other way around. People at Apple are seeing a lot of value in Mac Virtual Display, and they're like, I would love just something like, and I've been talking about this for several versions of the podcast, I realize, something like those X-Real glasses, but with better than 1080p resolution to show my screen, right? So that I can have nice neutral neck posture and a more ergonomic and pleasant experience and have a way huge fucking screen no matter where I am that would follow my eyes around, right? Even if I'm on an airplane. So, well, don't get your hopes up because the news is Apple canceled that thing you didn't know about. So that's too bad. I guess 8 more years of Vision Pro for us. So I'm hoping that they update that thing at some point. But, I realize I'm unusual. Speaking of Vision Pro, I actually had a little epiphany this morning. So I use it in an open face configuration. I used to use the light shield that it comes with, but it kind of compresses and puts a lot of weight on the on my cheek, like underneath my eyes. And so instead, I just got rid of the light shield entirely. It's like, it's in a box and threw it away. And instead, I have this like Bobo, Oculus MetaQuest designed third-party headset that like they're called straps. You attach to the MetaQuest, and I'm using that, but with these 3D printed adapters on my Vision Pro, and it kind of just turns the whole thing into a helmet. So I just put it on like a hat, and then the Vision Pro is just magically in front of me, perfectly positioned in front of my eyes. And so all that shit around my face is wide open air. I get good airflow. I'm not going to get weird acne from shit pressing up against my skin. Which is a thing that happens with all these different VR products. And one of the things that's interesting about it is I kind of am getting that AR-like experience because I don't have the computer literally strapped into my face. I can see my peripheral vision. And I got to tell you, like, if you haven't used a Vision Pro like this, it is uncanny how well they were able to tackle the pass-through video to seriously, it just looks like you're looking at the same thing, the curvature, like all of the sort of like chromatic aberration is tuned just right to like when you're looking at off angle. I've got this little remote on the desk. When I look at it and it's like right halfway between what I can see through the Vision Pro lens and what I can see through my actual eye hole, like, sure, there's a gap in the middle because there's that little bezel effectively at the edge of the Vision Pro where it's like a piece of metal and it's rounded. But then everything on like the real life side of my field of view and everything on the Vision Pro lens side of my field of view, there's no distortion. It's a straight, contiguous line that like I can interpolate with my eyes. It looks perfect at every distance, no matter what the device is. And yes, like this is a solvable problem with physics and like really good head tracking. The cameras are not perfect, but to experience it on a daily basis like I have for months, where the only downgrade really in what you see in the pass-through video in front of you is like it's not HDR, so the brightness isn't as bright, the colors aren't as rich. Kind of looks like you're looking through a foggy smear, but if I were wearing ski goggles, I would feel the same way. So just a shout out to Apple for building a really cool fucking product nobody needs except for me, and please keep making it. Given that it's a really cool product that nobody needs, Samsung had their big phone event for the year where they announced their 25 phones. So they put their numbering scheme right as just like the year number. It's like Madden, but for Samsung phones. So they announced their 25 phones. No one, for the most part, gave a shit except for one that's thin and looks exactly like the iPhone 17 Air is expected to look. Well, they also, and that's just a prototype. It's not like a real thing. They just wanted to get out ahead of it like they do. They also announced this thing called Project Muhan, probably Muhan. And it looks a lot like a MetaQuest Pro or a Vision Pro. And most of the reaction was, oh, here they go, copying the Vision Pro again by just looking at the device. It ships with an operating system made by Google called Android XR, like for mixed reality, effectively. And holy shit, like, I looked at the device, I was like, oh, sure, it's a Vision Pro ripoff. Whatever. It will or won't release. It's probably going to amount to a hill of beans like all the VR stuff does. But MKBHD did a video that was very generous. I mean, they were giving him access, and this is how it works, right? Like, it was, he had critical things to say, don't get me wrong. But, like, this fucking operating system is a shot-for-shot remake of the Vision OS. Like, it is... Steve Jobs was ready to go, quote unquote, thermonuclear against Google for copying pinch to zoom and like a couple other gestures, multi-touch in the original iPhone and in Android. And Android had originally been much more of a BlackBerry-like interface where you'd be keyboard dominant with like a little scroll ball in the middle. That seemed, okay, sure, they copied some stuff, but there's also something quite intuitive about multi-touch and quite intuitive around pinching something on a screen with two fingers. Yes, Apple patented it, but like at the end of the day, I didn't feel like Google had committed some sort of, heist. You look at this Android XR thing and my Lord, like it is, hey, do you want to know how to grab a window and move it from place to place? Well, there's this gray-white bar, horizontal bar at the bottom of every window, and you just pinch that with the eye tracking, and then you can move it. I'm like, oh, so like literally identical to Vision OS? Why, yes, it is. Okay, well, how do you resize? Okay, well, in the bottom left or right corner, a little round rect segment path will show up if you look there, and then you pinch that, and then you drag it to make the window bigger and smaller at all sorts of different sizes, using like effectively the same. So how Vision OS accomplishes that is that it uses the same basic dynamic sizing in the iPad, so that you can support different form factors and rotations of iPads. And sure enough, Android XR does the exact same trick because it's also supporting all of the tablet apps that are on Android. Really all Android apps, but like you can drag and drop them or drag and resize them just like that. Okay, so far, that looks pretty similar. I get it, but there's only so many ways you can do that. So like, how do I get to the home screen? Oh, well, you hit the crown thing. the button on top, you hit that, and then that launches like an app launcher where I'm like, okay, so like what do they look like? Well, they're all little circles arranged in like a honeycomb of, I don't know, about a dozen of them. Exactly like Vision OS. And then I'm like, okay, so if you have more than a dozen apps, then how do you move through it? Surely there's something creative, like a new UI gesture or something. Oh, well, you just pinch as if you're paginating and then swipe to a next page, which will be on the right of the first page of more apps. And you're like, that is, one, that's bad and dumb. Like, could have thought of a million different things to do with all this fucking room around you if you're looking at apps. But two, that is literally exactly the same UI metaphor that Vision OS chose to use. So like, it is just, I get it, the great artists steal, but this is just proof positive, I think, that Apple probably landed at better answers. I want to say the right answer, better answers for UI in like a computing interface in 3D with Vision OS than they get credit for, because it is, if there's not a lawsuit coming out of this, it's probably because Google is also paying, Apple $25 billion to have their search engine show up, to the point that like Apple wants that money so bad that they're actually begging the DOJ to let them be a co-defendant in the case to say that they should keep getting all that money. So like, the days of going thermonuclear over this shit are long gone. But for anyone who has taste, you just look at this and it's just like, this looks like I bought a knockoff Vision Pro from China and I opened it up and it like all the apps look kind of like the other apps, but it's not quite right. Now this is not a real product. It's not out yet. It'll change, I'm sure. But oh man, like this is embarrassing. If you work at Google or if you work at Samsung, I mean, Samsung, that's its own. It's like, it's basically like a nation state at this point, South Korea. But like, I'm sure somebody at Samsung feels shame. I'm sure some of them have shame in their heart for the shameless stealing that they do. But like Google at least still has like play acts, like they're making and designing shit and like the material design and like this particular style. And this is, Android has a lot of those little touches. They are not to be found in Android XR. It is just fucking Vision OS. Like I've used Android phones. I've had one recently, and I'm always thrown off because just things are in different and surprising places, and it's unfamiliar to me. I could put this goddamn Android XR headset on, never having touched it, and do absolutely everything immediately and totally intuitively. It is that much of a ripoff. It is not iOS versus Android. This is like next level highway robbery. So that was funny. I don't know. I'll link to the video. Watch it yourself. I'd love to hear your takes. Podcast@searls.co. Tell me what you think. Tell me if I'm high or something. Vision Pro also, speaking of companies that Apple doesn't get along with, but also they mutually make a lot of money off each other, but definitely doesn't appreciate. When Vision OS was announced, they said that Unity was going to be the kind of 3D rendering pipe for everything in Vision OS. And that means like you would hand it meshes, and then you'd have to use Unity to get those meshes rendered. And the reason for that, other than the fact that they were really pissed off at Epic and wouldn't have thought to use the Unreal Engine for this purpose, even though the Unreal Engine is much more advanced in many ways, especially when it comes to VR. The reason that they didn't use Unreal was that they were fighting with them in court about the whole Fortnite controversy, and we've been down that road. But the technical reason for why they would not let you actually use spatial, like custom rendering pipeline stuff is because they want to make sure that all of the lighting and the shading between these virtual objects in 3D space is consistent and can trick your brain. Because there's no way to render a 3D object without also shading and lighting it to some extent. Well, I mean, you could do a custom pipeline where you get to do everything but that last step, I suppose. But it was much easier for Apple just to be like, look, if you're doing some sort of mixed reality thing or AR like experience, all of the shit in your field of view, in your little play space, has to be rendered by the Unity engine. And we actually get to do that. You just hand us the polygons. That made me feel like, as a gamer who would love to have real games available for his $3,500 VR headset, it made me feel like, well, the likelihood of getting any sort of Unreal Engine support is nil right now. And it turns out VisionOS is just gotten, Epic just shipped a version of Unreal Engine 5 that has experimental support for VisionOS. And not only that, but in the announcement, then I'll share the link, they were planning on just doing immersive mode because that's all you really could do, where you take over the whole screen and then you're kind of in a full game. But apparently VisionOS 2 loosened up that particular constraint, and now they're able to use Unreal Engine to render 3D objects in your physical environment, like doing the whole AR mixed reality thing. And that's fucking awesome. Like, that's really, really great. That's awesome technology. And they said they've optimized against the new version of Metal a lot. And like, boy, is this really, really encouraging and gratifying in spite of the fact that no one's going to make a goddamn game because less than 200 people purchased Resident Evil 2 on their iPhone. So it's a Pyrrhic victory here, but I'm glad to see it. So there's that. Now, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, the news that's dominated tech this week, because once again, some piece of arcane technical trivia resulted in, and when combined with a really high App Store ranking of an app, a new app, combined with it happened to be Davos week, and people were talking about it, and all the billionaires were in a room getting all excited about it. The stock market just took a big old fucking shit because Nvidia has been propping up all the stock indices with its absolute tear of just a valuation that can only go up. And DeepSeek, which was, kind of coincident with its sudden relevance and popularity in this app coming out, were news articles saying that it only took them $5.6 million worth of computation to train the final version of the model, which was that's going in the opposite direction of what OpenAI has been telling us, that level of investment and hardware that you'll need to make anything not only as good as but better than the current crop of large language models. And so this disrupted the narrative of, wow, like, man, these LLMs, we want to make them smarter. How can we make them smarter? And there's typically two paths in front of you, right? If you're a programmer, and this is the age-old thing. Like, and I think people who are technical, who thought about AI critically, and I like to think that I did, because I spent most of Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday texting my finance bro friends and saying, I told you so. There's two paths when you need to make something faster or scale better. One is you throw fucking hardware at it and you just spend a lot of money and you buy more computers and you plug them all in. And ideally, that comes with the prerequisite of you need to make it scalable. You need to design the thing to be able to run on multiple computers. But like AI, because it came of age in the era when we kind of just know to do that, and because the types of computations that you need to perform are matrix multiplication, which turns out like that's exactly what GPUs have always been designed for. Graphics processing units have always been focused on matrix multiplication because it's also what you need to render 3D environments and apparently mine crypto, right? So like those simple computations we've had to figure out how to be able to paralyze the absolute living fuck out of them for so long that AI comes around and it's like, okay, so we know we can scale this shit if we just keep throwing GPUs at the problem, because GPUs are essentially infinitely scalable. So you can go down that path and you can just pay a goddamn fortune. Now, door number 2 is pause, take a walk, and think really, really hard about how you can get the same thing from the computer by doing less. How you can cut corners creatively so that your computer spends less time overall computing wastefully on stuff that it didn't really need to get to the answer. And therein lies the entire practice of algorithm design and profiling and looking at performance and really scrutinizing. And it's a distillation. It's a simmering task to find ways to, because it's counterintuitive. The intuitive way is just burn, baby, burn. Let's just spend more money. And the hard thing is, especially when you feel urgency, because when you feel urgency, you got all the adrenaline in your system, you got all the testosterone firing, and you're like, we just got to go forward. You're playing, it's like you're playing a contact sport, and you just got to plow through and just fucking force it. But that's not the mindset that you need to redesign, challenge all your assumptions and redesign, like, how does this fucking thing work? Do we really need to, for example, invoke all of the model right now? Or can we just talk to just this corner of the model once we know that, like, the category of the request is here? Or, like, could we, actually use reinforcement training, which is something that AI has been doing for years, especially when it comes to games. Like, if you program an AI to play Tetris, you will give it reinforcement. If the score is higher, you'll say that was a better job, and it'll know, it'll be able to train itself effectively. So basically, DeepSeek, Chinese company, they did not have access to the H100s and the amazing server-grade NVIDIA GPUs because the CHIPS Act and the Biden administration effectively told China, go fuck yourselves. And so they were operating under, they couldn't go down path A, right? They only had path B, which is like, be smarter and design something that, given the constraints of just consumer-grade graphics processing units, figure out something that is tractable. And they did. And they did in several different ways. They got the reinforcement learning. They've got, Sam Altman very hypocritically is like all in a huff because, like, they were using our model as input into their system. And then, so basically their whole model now is just trained off of our data. How dare they? Which, of course, is the literal thing he did to the whole fucking internet. So, a little bit of pot kettle black there, and hopefully he appreciates. I don't know that man can fucking think right now. He probably only sees blood vessels in his eyes because his IPO is just exploding in front of him, and he's not going to be the next Steve Jobs. Like, he's seeing that whole path just evaporate because his entire course, his entire mission was based on this lie, this alpha male. I don't know what his technical chops are. I don't know if he was ever a programmer. I just know that the dude was like, he ran Y Combinator, which is like a Ponzi scheme generation system for startups in the Valley to, like, we'll get all these founders and we'll take a big old chunk of, like, share in their business. And then they'll, like, live in a house together and then just code a lot and find, we'll connect them with a network of other people. But most of it is just wheeling and dealing and kind of providing access for investors to opportunities to invest in, and you get to be a middleman in that transaction. And so the answer to the question of, should I invest? Should we go bigger? Should we scale higher? Is always fucking yes. In fact, whenever you got a problem, the answer is almost always more scale. That's the guy. That's who Sam Altman is. That's like what he did and what he was good at, is making things that probably don't need to exist bigger. And so OpenAI, which is a company who has a product that's a chatbot, and I use it dozens of times a day. And I'm able to use it to meet many of my needs. A lot of people use it all the time, but it is a product that is like, you're looking at it and everyone's kind of like, so what's the killer app going to be? Because these valuations that you're talking about, this picture that to be a salesperson, to be selling investments, you got to be selling a future. It's like, people won't have jobs anymore, is kind of like what he's selling, is this idyllic utopia that just is seemingly impossible, but the investments are increasing in proportion to that utopic vision and not to the, what are we actually seeing here? Like, what's the there in terms of what's going to justify this valuation? That disposition, that temperament, and it's got to start at the top because there's no one fucking left in OpenAI's leadership that was there when it was like, focused on the science of it all. That temperament will never respect and circle back and think like, how could we just do this smarter? I realize it might take longer and we might not reach the same scale and we might not, if I've had customers before as a consultant where I told them like, hey, there's this path here where we can get a squad of like 4 people. We could build the whole fucking app. I told this to a person who's like a well-to-do VC. This is a long time ago. There's no NDA here. I told him we can build a whole fucking app in like 6 months on contract. And he's like, that's the worst thing that you could possibly do for me because I need to grow this to 1,000-person engineering team. And I was like, squeeze me? Like, why? Like, I didn't literally say why because I kind of knew, right? Because you got to win the next round of investors in the next funding round by having the big office that's full of the foosball tables and the complimentary 1-minute massage chairs. You got to have that there so that they look around and think, oh, this is happening. This is where it's at. This is good. This is growing. And you got to demonstrate that growth by hiring more and more people and opening up more offices and having all these teams with these fancy titles. And you got to see that activity. If you just build the fucking thing, then I don't have a Ponzi game, a shell game to like, build my Ponzi scheme on top of. I need 4 rounds of investment after me so that I can exit. Because then I make my money. If the whole thing blows up, I don't fucking care. In fact, the longer that I stretch this out, the more I make in management fees. He didn't literally spell out all that stuff to me, but like, that is the fucking game. Like, that is what they play. And that Sam Altman is a master in that game. Except this time, he finally gets to be the highly visible CEO. And yeah, I mean, so like, DeepSeek, all it did is just like, it just took a mathy sciencey approach, which a lot of people are doing because a lot of people are interested in AI, and it pantsed him because unlike all these other foundational models that are sort of, like, and a lot of the investment, a lot of the creative stuff happening in AI is sort of happening in this disintermediated fashion where it's like, well, I'm going to build something on top of OpenAI because building a foundational model is like really hard, or I'm going to do something on top of Anthropic's models or something. And all of that is then one layer removed further into like which cloud provider is going to have the GPUs to be able to run that model. And it's not that like literally all of us are operating under this assumption that it must be this way, that you need this many GPUs, both for creation of the models and also for inference, that is to ask the model questions. It's just that like, I don't got that kind of time. Like I'm just a dude and like, I'm not even a sciencey mathy dude, but like they're out there, but to have a company at the scale that the DeepSeek folks are, and to have it operating under constraint such that like they can't just play that game and go to the GPU well and just get more money and they had to come up with a different way. So what was so bizarre about this whole last year, 2 years, is that like as the march of all of the major tech companies in the US have just been saying, well, then that's why we got to buy even more of these NVIDIA GPUs, inflating like NVIDIA's revenue and profits to just the stratosphere. You'd get laughed out of the room if you tried to just raise a moderate amount of money, right? Just enough for a small team or a medium-sized company to go and build a model in a slightly different way. Like on the order of 50 to 150 or 50 million to 500 million, like in that range, they'd say, well, no, because it's clearly good. You're never going to compete with one of the big dogs here. And because you can't get that amount of funding, then you're just left with a whole bunch of pointy-haired PhDs telling us, and they've been telling us with blog posts and with like proofs of concept, like, actually, this could be done a lot better. Here's all the ways it could be done better. And the best way that they could make an impact was, I'm going to write a paper, I'm going to write a blog post. Hopefully somebody who works at one of these exactly 4 fucking companies will read this paper and then integrate it into their very big model, right? That's the best shot that we had. And of course, no one in the sort of like, the financial class is going to see that pipeline of I'm a blog post and I'm on the front page of Hacker News, and then I turn into like advice on like why OpenAI is actually quite inefficient or why these many GPUs aren't necessary. Because like the pump and dump scheme, like the game is still being played. Like there is no proof yet. And the only way to get proof is by way of these 4 or 5 companies making foundational models. Now, you've got somebody who's playing the game under completely different rules in China. It's outside the market, and it's under the... I don't mean to make too much of a point of the like fact that they did not have access to NVIDIA's server grade equipment. But one imagines that like if China really was serious about like just subsidizing the shit out of this so that they could take the lead in a major technological, wave like this, a revolution like this, they probably would have bought a bunch of them. I have to imagine. So it was kind of a perfect storm to not advance AI. It's not like this is the next thing. We're all going to be DeepSeek heads for the rest of our lives. All they had to do was show that the emperor had no clothes, that this is achievable without giving into the narrative that the only way forward to make these large language models, which seem to be kind of creaking at the edge of diminishing returns now, that the only way forward is $1 trillion or 5 new nuclear power plants to train it, right? Like, the things that Sam Altman has said are necessary are absolutely fucking comical. And they have to be if you're a person who can only imagine numbers going up in relatively predictable and naive ways. But if you can imagine like, oh, actually we were solving the wrong problem, or we were approaching it from the wrong angle, and there's a way that we could do it that is actually thanks to science and thanks to induction. Like there's a way smarter way to be doing what we're doing. That doesn't fit into the economic narrative of how startups grow up to be the next behemoth. And that's where I kind of land on, look, I don't know Sam Altman. He seems like a perfectly reasonable weirdo, but we have this great man theory, and it's tied up, I think, in the idea that like America and the American dream is truly meritocratic. And so you have this one group of people on one side, this sort of like libertarian Ayn Randian, like, hey, if somebody is rich, they are kind of like or at the top of a big company, and that company is in the front page of the Wall Street Journal all the time, then they are definitionally have merit or intelligence or something about them that earns them that. And of course, and if you're a hardcore believer in that, then anything contradicting that would give lie to your entire ideology. And of course, that's not literally true. And if you were to frame it that way, most of those folks would say, okay, yeah, sure, there's other factors. Now, on the other end, there's people who are just like the anti-capitalists, like, no, this is all like inside game, and it's all like everything is made. We're all a huge, complicated system, and it's all out there to fuck us. And the people who win are just like a Manchurian candidate or a stooge that's propped up by that system to be the next big person or whatever, and we're all just victims. Like, I hate to say it, but I kind of feel like the truth is somewhere in the middle here, right? It's like, yeah, you do try harder, you work harder, you're ambitious, you're competitive, you're probably going to come out ahead relative to somebody who's otherwise very similar to you, similarly situationed and positioned, who doesn't have those attributes. The flip side, though, is like, if you just happen to be in the Bay Area, you're statistically way more likely to have made a lot of money, if you're in my particular generation. And that's not like random chance, right? Like, it's not a truly like a pure meritocratic view of the world, right? Maybe this is why I've had so many people talk about like, oh, there's so many people moving to San Francisco. It's like, I know a lot of fucking locals who got super duper rich because they were right place, right time, and like they had the access and then the network to get the great job at that startup when it was going from 100 to 1,000 so that some VC could get paid. Like, so there's it's uncomfortable, but like the truth is that Sam Altman is not a fucking dummy. He's somebody who's ambitious, who seems really smart. He's got an incredible network, and he's audacious. He's got a vision. And there's other really like top of the, executive rooms in all these companies that are like, they're real similar, but like, they're still just fucking people. Like, painting like them as like they must either be a benevolent genius or some kind of supervillain not only gives them too much credit, but I think it robs us of the opportunity to see like the broader systems at play. And so in this particular case, listening to the news and the analysis this week, I was impressed that so many people were bringing up the trade restrictions and that aspect of it. But like, not a lot of people are really asking themselves, like, how do we keep creating these bubbles over and over again? And connecting the dots that the reason we create the bubbles is that the thing that we're valuing these companies based on is based on an ideology that like turns out to not very well model the world, right? Like the idea that if you can just make it bigger and higher headcount and greater scale and in the hands or on the phones of more people, and if you can build some kind of moat around it, then you're just in like Flynn and you're going to matter forever. And whatever you say in terms of your cockamamie fake accounting, like you're going to be the next big thing. Even though we have so many examples of companies that were the next big thing, and they checked all those boxes and they had the big IPO, but it just turned out that the fundamentals of their business were based on spending, for example, on every single direct-to-consumer app for fucking ever, was based on them using marketing money to overpay people on one side of the market, like say Uber drivers, and to subsidize the cost of rides on the other side, all with the promise that they'd figure it out in post, right? How many times do we have to go and see this movie to get to the same goddamn result? I think, look, this is just one blip in what will surely be an onward march down the AI train and investment and stuff. I don't think this is going to be the kind of come to Jesus moment that I would personally hope for it to be. But it's an interesting lodestone that hopefully we can point to say, like, look, like this is a great example of how the naive kind of putting the blinders up and just thinking the only way to advance is to grow is full of shit. So that's my I actually, I have this little topic in my notes. My note says, retail investors be mad. And then right next to it in the comment is like, don't talk too much. And I didn't want to spend too much time on this one, but that's my takeaway. So we'll see where things go. Most things are going to be the same. Things will get a little bit better, and people all learned a valuable lesson about how to train LLMs. But I don't think that very many people will have learned a valuable lesson about like the broader system that keeps creating these bubbles and wasting so much human capital and literal dollars on shit we just don't need. Speaking of wasting human capital and literal dollars, I wrote a blog post. I'm putting this in the news section. I wrote a quick post yesterday, 2 days ago. It was kind of just a dunk. Like, I don't do this very much. I am a guy who thinks I'm important enough that I'm talking on a podcast at you. I speak, I was just talking about the bravado and the confidence, the importance of, just kind of showing up and acting like you know your shit. But when it comes to me as a programmer, I think the reason that I've broken through in so many like contexts, whether that's creating content and sharing it online or showing up on social media, or just like in business and as a coworker, is like, I'm very, very comfortable being like, this is really fucking hard. This is complicated. I feel stupid right now. Do you feel? And like other people are silently feeling those things. And then it resonates. And I made it so much of my persona, I guess. And my self-concept got infected by the false humility that I would present in order to ingratiate myself to other people or to make them feel safe or welcome, where it's true, actually. When I founded TestDouble, I was 26 fucking years old. I look at some of the code I wrote then, I was like, I was indeed very bad at programming. It is a goddamn miracle I was able to trick enough people that I was good at programming, who were better at programming, who came and joined the company and then did most of the programming. But like, I've never let myself think that I was a good programmer. I would 10 years in to the company and I would say like, I have achieved competence. Like, whereas by competence, I mean, I feel comfortable that I can build an app that works without a lot of help. That's it. And it took me until I was, damn near 40 to get to that point. Now you say that and people get upset because it's like, well, that's unrealistic. Most people could never like, work that hard and whatnot. And it's like, we need companies to like have all these trainings and so forth. Like I get it. Like that's all a real problem. I'm only talking about me. But even then, competence is a low bar. And what I think of as competence is actually probably way fucking higher than most people will ever get or most companies can demonstrate. And I'm kind of I hit a point. So Becky, for her app, needed a podcast feature. She wants to host podcasts. She wants to do a podcast like this one. I don't know why, but I'll get to listen to it, and I look forward to it. And the way that I host this is like very techie, and programmers can do this. I've got like a shell script that like uploads each episode to an S3 bucket somewhere. So that's not going to be how she does it. So I needed to build her a way or provide her a way to host podcasts. Now, she could have done this herself. She could have gone to Anchor or whatever these like services are and pay a lot of money for an RSS feed that would just disappear the minute you stop paying them money. And she could have, but I was like, I just built you this CMS, this like content management system, this whole backend for your other aspects of your business, the Becky Graham blog, effectively, as well as the Build with Becky, members module. Like we could just add on to that CMS, to that backend, like a couple of models pertaining to podcasts, and then like a thing to schedule their publication, and then an RSS feed for them. Like it's not that many moving parts. Like all I'd really have to do is make sure that the stuff handling those attachments can now talk in terms of audio files, and make sure that all the MIME types line up, and that it validates the file and so forth, and measures how big the file is, because that's one of the things you need in your iTunes RSS. And we'd agreed I would work on it, but it was going to be a someday project for me. I was like, record a few episodes first and then call me, and then I'll build this. But she'd expressed, at some point last week, no, not even, it was like Tuesday, that she wanted to record a podcast, not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday, like within a week. And I immediately was like, oh man, I told her, I was like, I feel pressured now to like turn this around. And because it was clearly like she wanted not just to record a file and have a file on her computer, she wanted it out. And that's fair. Like if I make something, I want it out as fucking soon as possible. Right. So I decided, instead of making this about, oh, well, darn it, like now I got to stop doing what I'm doing and spend who knows how long to make this podcast feature. I decided to sit down and be like, you know what? If I don't want to do this so bad, why don't I use all those tricks of the trade that I tell other people about and just see how fucking fast I can do it well? And so I did. And I spent that day, 2 days ago, I got up at, 7:30. And by noon, I had a working podcast hosting thing with like the UI that she would need and like scheduling and all that. And by about 2 p.m., I had the RSS side of it all figured out. And it was generating feeds that looked valid. And by like 3:30, 4 p.m., it was deployed and in production. And now there's nothing to see there, right? Additionally, you have the website side. So like, like highly cached with like Russian doll caching, like a nice, like a front end. So like there's a homepage for the podcast, and then also like lists out of the podcast, and you can go into those episode shows and show with markdown, or she writes markdown. It'll show like the show notes, you know what a podcast website looks like. So it's like one of those. And I did it all in under a day. And I thought like, man, if this was just like, some Joe Blow team out there, this would have found a way to be a quarterly project. Like, oh, for this quarter, we're going to add product hosting to this product, right? And it would have been a team of 8 people who'd like spend a whole bunch of time planning out like how they're going to do it, and a lot of complexity, and then sandbagging on estimates. I'm not saying this is every company. Don't get me wrong. But even if I was on a team of 4 or 5 people, like my expectations of others, I just have to drop to like the lowest common denominator because I don't know who's going to work on something. And so work is a gas because it will expand to fit its container. And by giving this project, I'm willing to give this project a day in my life. By giving it just a day, you know what? There's not a lot of automated testing around it. There's some, but there's not a lot. Like the factoring isn't perfect. There's 1 or 2 things that I probably duplicated that are somewhere else in the system that I didn't reuse. But I did reuse a lot. In fact, I reused more than I normally would have because I didn't want to have to reinvent the wheel. I did not want this to take a week because I only gave myself the day. But if you're just on a project and everyone's paid salary, it's so typical to see something like this, like just like could theoretically be done in a day, instead take weeks or a month. And then when it comes out, it's hard to do when a day-long task takes a month. It's hard to maintain focus. It's hard to maintain purity of line. Now, not only did the thing take a month, which is separately bad, but like also its lack of focus resulted in other bugs and confusing user interfaces and data models that are super complicated and have extra shit all over the place. And now you got all these joiners and because the data model is complex, now we need a Postgres view in front of it. So that we can have that and query that. And then we have this other system over here because, actually, like we had 4 people working on the project, and Jerry over there, actually, he wanted to do this as like a separate service. And so he's got this little module over here that we have to call over HTTP to get this back. Because it's finding the open graph image or whatever the fuck. I don't know. And that's just how it works. That's like how most companies are, right? So I'm not saying like that's bad. I mean, it is bad. I'm not saying like I'm way more brilliant than any other programmers that work at companies like that or on teams like that or have had experience, because I've been that fucking guy, because that's what it means to be in a system and on a team in this current economy. But also at the same time, I'm kind of like, I'm sick of eating shit when I talk to people about how their team is so slow, or about like, their particular, like them as an individual, like their agency in the situation. I've been very much coming from the place for my whole career because I want to win people over and I want to please them, coming from the perspective of like, taking their side, be like, yeah, that does suck. It sounds like you're in a really tough system. Like, oh yeah, like the coworkers or that, like, like the environment there, it does sound like it's challenging and you're doing the best you can. But like, are you though? Are you doing the best that you can? Like, look, only you know that. I'm just saying that to make you feel better. What I'm finding is like when I sit down to make a thing, it is turning out a lot better than any of the apps that I actually use and pay for. It is more functional. It is faster. It is simpler. It is, I can't tell how much effort it takes to update the apps that I use. But like when I update it, it's because new dependencies came out and stuff upstream, or I'm adding features. It's not just like, how many times, if you actually look at the updates in your app store, is it just like bug fixes, right? Because they're starting from a place of a sinking ship and they've got to be patching constantly. Like, it's not that. Like when I do shit, like it just usually fucking works. And if I forgot something, it's so basic that it's like, I forgot to plug the hose in to this other, outlet over here. Well, then I plug it in and it starts working, right? This post for me was important because it was me for the first time that I can recall on the internet being like, I am fucking good at programming and I'm better than most of you motherfuckers. I'm definitely better than a lot of teams of programmers out there in terms of what do you get for the time that you spend? The amount of person days or whatever. And like, that's uncomfortable because this is me tooting my own horn, but also like me pussyfooting around this for so many years and acting like these dysfunctional teams can just like magically migrate through good vibes and more pair programming into like being as like good as one expert who's just focused and giving himself a deadline or operating under a constraint that clarifies the vision and the needs for the system. Like, those are all things that you can actually do. And I think a lot of successful companies do manage this. You can have that energy and that mindset and that urgency and that focus and the liberating constraints. You can do that not just one time inside of a company, but you can splinter off lots of experiments that way. You could have a culture in a company that is that way. That's high. Instead of making one $500 million bet, you're making $501 million bets, or way smaller than that, right? So anywho, it was restorative. It was just getting to the end of that day and being like, not like patting myself on the back, not being like, I'm a fucking badass, awesome programmer. It's just like, no, it's like, I'm just doing all the shit that I've been talking about in conference talks for so long and writing blog posts about. I'm practicing it, and then I'm getting the outcomes that I said that like other people would get. But I can demonstrate it now. I see it happening. And am I gratified that I feel like this is like a capstone on my whole career now? That I can like have this product to just be like, yes. Yes, that's very gratifying. But like, if I'm going to keep on having a podcast and doing videos and stuff, and I've got aspirations of streaming me learning Swift, which I will also be very, very bad at. If I want to keep on having something useful to say to people like you at the other end of this line, then I need to be honest about the fact that like, it's not that like when your way, your approach or your solution isn't working or is resulting in a lot of bugs. I would find myself typically treating the symptom. Oh, it's a lot of bugs. Okay, well, let's look at the bugs and let's find a way to work through those bugs faster. It's like, oh, your team doesn't get along really well and you don't collaborate super closely. It's like, okay, well, here's like some exercises you can do to foster pair programming. Like the right solution in a lot of those cases is, oh, you got a lot of bugs. Like, who's typing those things and what's going through their head, right? Like, maybe it's the wrong fucking programmers. Maybe they're not good enough at programming. As a consultant, I don't think I ever said that. I don't think I ever went to a client and be like, your programmers are insufficiently good at programming. Even though in my head, I knew that was like, it was axiomatic because like the programmers are never good enough at any fucking company. It's why there's so many of us. So I'm willing to just kind of call a spade at this point, I guess is what I'm saying. So yeah, it's a declaration of competence. Like I realize now that I've been bullshitting you for a long time to protect your feelings. Not you, but maybe you, depending. And I'm done doing that because it's unkind to you ultimately. And it's providing a lens that is unrealistically optimistic. Like, because a lot of these companies, like, yes, this team doesn't get along because that guy's an asshole, right? Pair programming is not going to fix that. There's not a practice that you can do. There's not a way you're going to just gently manage somebody like him out of the organization. Like, you can deal with the problem head on or not. And I would get there eventually with clients, but I would give every single possible, well, I'm sure whoever hired the person was like, no, whoever fucking hired him, they're on the watch list. Like, what the fuck, right? Figure it out. And so I've lost whatever remaining scales that I'd built up. From the fear of conflict, from the fear of hurting somebody's feelings. And it's a theoretical fear because I thought I'd post that and then get a bunch of people mad at me, and didn't happen. At least that or they didn't read it. But either way, it's making me feel like I will dish out better takes and advice that's more actionable. Like, because what's the point of advice on like, how's the right way to program if it's devoid of the context that what you're solving for is actually not achievable in your current environment or configuration or approach or level of expertise? Like, the whole picture needs to be there. Otherwise, you'll end up like wasting time learning how to like use one of my test double libraries when actually the tests that you're writing are the wrong tests, right? Like, I've decided I'm going to take a step back and be just a little bit more raw with you. And I realize that's going to be funny to the people who think that I'm already just like the most fucking unfiltered loudmouth that they've ever seen. I'm not about to say like, hey, watch me fly off the handle even harder here. I'm just going to try to be a little bit more honest. And so if that ever ends up hurting your feelings, sorry, not sorry is kind of where I'm landing. Anywho, speaking of hot takes, I'm building my next app. This is also news. There's two self-serving pieces of news. Building my next app, and this is Frankly, it's so that I can dish these hot takes out better in a higher fidelity, because I've been syndicating my website for a couple years now. And a lot of people have expressed interest in, like, I would love to also syndicate my website to all these different social platforms so I don't have to follow them. And I've got a URL at my site that's /posse, so justin.searles.co/POSSE, and it lists out all of the different integrations that I currently have that'll fling my content to Twitter and Mastodon and Threads and Instagram and now Blue Sky. And probably other places too. Of course, I got the RSS feed itself, which is an Atom feed specifically. If you were to look at how I've implemented this, you would not be asking me for my advice on how to make this happen, because I've got like 3 different Docker containers running on a Synology downstairs in our bonus room. And they fail a lot, and none of them have notification for like when they fail. And so like sometimes like the tweets just don't go right. I've got one GitHub action that often doesn't work. And then, yeah, it's very ramshackle. It's very I would never open source what I currently have and say, hey, go nuts. Even though I have written a couple like Ruby gems to support it. Instead, just maintaining my own website, and achieving what is possible when I'm using a lot of other people's libraries for actually doing the posting. Like feed to toot is this Python program that I didn't write. I just run it in a Docker container, and it's pretty limited in like how you can configure the appearance of those posts on Mastodon. Well, if I want to, like, for example, when I have a hot take, I don't want to tack a URL onto the end of it, which will then tack on all this open graph information. I only want to, show just the take, unless it gets truncated, in which case I do want to show the URL at the end, right? But again, not with the open graph stuff. Like certain things like that just aren't achievable that way. I needed my custom software. And I'd done this before for syndicating to Threads, and for Instagram, I made 2 Ruby gems for that purpose. But I was like, you know what? If I just had like a stateful database with a configuration scheme, I could make a single Rails app. It's probably, if you've seen my fuck this.app announcement, it's probably going to be the first in a suite of fuck this.app tools. I call it syndication. And so syndication will take an Atom feed as well as a specially formatted, and you can go and look at my Atom feed if you want to look at this, a specially formatted little JSON blob in a new XML tag called syndication:post. And that JSON will configure the things that you can't in just looking at an Atom feed, in terms of what's the format string for how you want this to post. You can override it on a per platform basis, yada, yada. And so far, as of today, I have now shipped adapters into production for both Blue Sky and for Twitter/X. And I've turned off any other integrations that I had for those two. And so now if you were to see me on Twitter or see me on Blue Sky, those posts are coming from this new Rails app, just running in a background job off in Heroku land. And I'm building it like all my other joints, like trying to be minimalist, travel light, not a lot of dependencies, understanding that this thing is going to have to integrate to like 6 or 7 different systems ultimately. And because I've followed the basic, anyone who's ever heard of the adapter pattern, like the basic architecture is pretty straightforward. Like you build the engine and the job system and all this stuff that's going to actually push the sludge into one channel, right? Like Blue Sky was the first one I started with. All I got to do is build a thin, candy, like little tiny adapter over here for the next social media site that I do, which in this case was X. And because as long as it adheres to that API contract of like whatever the Blue Sky one does, it is really only, I had to back out and refactor a few things, but it was really only 30 lines of code to add Twitter, and then it just worked. So that's great. And that means I can probably sit down and shit out like a Mastodon integration, a Threads integration. I've already done all the API work for Threads because I've got that other gem out there. And after that, who knows? Maybe I'll do Facebook. Maybe I'll do LinkedIn. Why not just blast it everywhere that people are wasting their fucking time? Is my my perspective, since I don't use any of these goddamn apps because I think they're all toxic. Learn how to use RSS readers. Go get NetNewsWire. I don't know. That's my advice. So anyway, that's what I'm up to. I'll share a couple of the takes, the first takes they've gotten syndicated to each of those places. Yeah, well, that about does it. I'm excited to be working on something for myself. I'm hoping to not have this take too much time because, again, the point isn't for me to say shit on the internet better. I just want the shit that I say to represent me well and to show up in the right places and look good in all of the forms and in all of the destinations where it shows up, so that I can actually go start doing some new stuff like learning Swift or building that language app that I keep talking about. And do it in a way that as I share stuff, it actually has a prayer in hell of getting some kind of traction. Or even if it's just the same, you lot, it looks good. It's presentable. It represents, the vision without seeming kind of hinky. All right. I've said the word hinky. That means that the news is over and it is time for some recommendations. First up is, it's not a video game or a movie or a TV show, which is normally the fare that populates the recommendations that I have on offer. It's a device. It is I'm looking at it right now. It's a Alarmo, which is a new product from Nintendo. Jeremy had imported from Japan for me for my birthday. Very, very thoughtful gift. I'm dicking around with it now. Hopefully it doesn't make sounds. And it's just the most Nintendo fucking thing ever. It's a bad alarm clock. Like, it's kind of like awkward to use, and who needs a goddamn alarm clock? But it's got a sensor and can see if you're awake or not. And no, it can see if you're tossing and turning or not, or if you're present, I suppose. And it doesn't make any sense for somebody who sleeps in a bed with somebody else. But like, it's got in very Nintendo fashion, it works perfectly well, even when it's not connected to Wi-Fi. In fact, I didn't even know if it could connect to Wi-Fi because the entire setup doesn't even ask you that. It was so delightful to use a new device. It's got a little LCD screen on it. It's got a couple buttons, but like, you go through the whole tutorial, the whole setup, and the first unboxing experience, like, you don't even know if it's internet connected. Like, whereas almost everything else in the world doesn't work until you give it your WPA 2 or 3 password and type in and pick out your SSID. But you can, after the fact, connect it to Wi-Fi, and then you get, it downloads new alarms automatically. And so it's got every kind of theme possible, all these different, Nintendo IPs like Zelda, Mario Kart, the one with the Splatoon, the little squid people. And when you select a different theme, the clock looks a certain way. You get the little character kind of like walking around. You can have them do an hourly chime that's like according to that theme. And then the alarm, of course, is going to be music or whatever. And the conceit, and I'm not going to take advantage of this because I don't need a goddamn alarm clock. I like it as a tchotchke, is like, if you stay in bed too long, the longer you stay in bed, the more urgent and like, death defying the music becomes. Like, you're coming close to a fail state in a game, like the chomp chomp's coming too close, to try to get you out of bed. And then you move, you get up and you hit the button. And if you get back in bed within an hour, it'll like start yelling at you again. So it's a really clever device. It's just like a joyful little something. So when this comes out here, or if you're in Japan, buy it. If you're in the US or in the West, I don't know when it comes out, but it's very cute. If you've got a kid, it would probably be awesome to have in a kid's room. Okay, now to our regularly scheduled TV, video games, and movies. Becky and I watched The Wild Robot while we were on the cruise. It was the only thing on the on-demand TV that did move down from the ceiling by hitting the B button, I want to say, on the remote. It's the only thing on the on-demand that didn't look like a terrible fucking movie. I don't know. It's not like on a plane where you get just about everything. It's like, these are the movies that failed. Which of these failures of a movie would you like to watch on your cruise? And it looked, we saw a trailer in Japan of it that made it look way better than it was portrayed in the trailers I saw in America. It's The Wild Robot. The Wild Robot, which is also a real stupid fucking name, is a robot who lands in the wild and then like becomes one with the animals and makes friends. And the robot's not supposed to be there. The robot's just like a house robot, but like it's got to like figure out how animals communicate. And it's a DreamWorks animated movie. And like, honestly, it just like, it doesn't sell itself well. Like, the whole arc of it is, you know, very clearly from the people who brought you like Happy Feet. You know, it's like that art style. You kind of look at it. I think that there's actually like a lot of nice stuff about the art style, and I think that the story is really nice. Like it's a good movie. It's just like the number of things I had to, the number of thoughts I had to have before I allowed myself to realize this is a good movie, and then the amount of self-congratulatory patting on the back I did was like, look at me allowing myself to think that this is a good movie, even though it's from DreamWorks Animation. It reminded Becky and I were saying like the last time we liked a DreamWorks animated movie was probably Ants, like the Woody Allen one. Which we both feel is better than A Bug's Life, which I still have never seen, so I don't know why I feel that way, or how I can get away with saying that. The answer is, have a solo podcast. No one can ever shoot you down what you're saying. Another recommendation, Star Trek Unification. This is it's a YouTube made in collaboration between somebody and the Gene Roddenberry Archives, the family. And it was really cool use of modern AI and editing technology to take a couple of actors to look like they were William Shatner at various points in his life as Captain Kirk, and Leonard Nimoy towards the end of his, because it's a unifying the Prime timeline and the Kelvin timeline. And if you know what that means, you probably have already watched this, but it was very sweet. So if you slept on Star Trek Unification, it is like literally 10 minutes fucking long. It's not a lot going on. It's just like, it's a nice feel. It's a bookend that the movies were not able to provide us. So that's cool. I guess it's canon. I don't know. One of the things I mentioned, GameCube on the Steam Deck. The reason I was Googling that was I wanted to play GameCube on the Steam Deck. And I did. And so I started playing Pikmin on the cruise, and because I didn't have internet access for the device, you know, I didn't have Voom for my Steam Deck. I was like, good, now I'll just dig in and play an old school, like retro pre-internet game, and be reminded of how fucking hard they are and how frustrating the UI and the controls are. And so I got through, I think, like 5 or 6 days inside of the Pikmin game. You're collecting spaceship parts, and you know, there's a lot of creature comforts that I've gotten used to, like being able to save all the time and good camera controls and being able to skip repetitive tutorials and cinematics. But to be honest, the ability to do instant save states in a retro game has always been really nice. Like this jump looks hard, I'll save state. Oh, I missed the jump. And now instead of having to redo all of this shit or potentially risk having a game over, I just load from that state and try the jump again. For Nintendo 64, GameCube, like newer games, like that save state process has traditionally been pretty slow and takes up a lot of space. But as far as I can tell, like it's basically instantaneous here. And so I was playing Pikmin with save states, and every time I like threw a Pikmin the wrong way, I was like, sweet, reload. Because I'm trying to min-max and try to like beat the game in as few days as possible. And I had a lot of fun. Now, of course, like I still reached a point where I was like, this is more frustration than it's worth. And so then I stopped having fun and then I stopped playing. But I had a glorious couple of hours. So yeah, if you're looking to get back into that particular era of like Dreamcast or GameCube, maybe PS2, I don't know what the story looks like there. It's pretty neat. I don't know. Another older game that's been remade that I'm playing is called Persona 3 Reloaded. Persona 3 was a PS2 game. It's a spin-off series of a different RPG series. If you don't know what Persona is, it's like the kind of common thread is you're a character that's in high school in Japan, and so you got like a mix of slice of life everyday RPG stuff of like I'm just a kid missing class and I got a crush on this girl. But then by night it's like, yo, there's like this portal to like the dark universe is gonna fucking kill everybody, and you've got 12 days to clear out this dungeon or it fucking will. And also, like, your basketball coach is evil, and he's actually a monster, and you got figure it out. Just figure it out. That's the game. And you'll never guess, I really like the first half of the conceit. I like, hey, look, it's like, you know, I'm in a Japanese high school as a high school student, so I'm using simpler language. I'm playing the game in Japanese. and I'm using simpler, like everyday language. It's like practical and like, oh wow, that's interesting. And so I've got like my iPad there, and I'm translating kind of all the stuff that I can't understand. It has a log, which is really nice because then even mid conversation, I think you press like R3 and it brings up like the whole transcript of all the things the characters have been saying to you, which is unheard of. I can't think of another series that does this. Persona 5 did the same thing. And you can just scroll up and find the piece of text that you didn't understand or maybe you didn't quite hear. Press like the confirmation, like the A or the X key button, and it'll play back the audio again for you. So you can play it as many times as you want and be like, oh wow, that inflection, like I didn't really get that. Oh, I get what they were saying now, and it matches, of course, with the text. This is like, as a learning, platform, games like this, like slice of life role playing games with good subtitles and like a log tool like this, they're totally priceless for me as a language learner because I've got some agency. I'm moving around. I'm like, oh, I want to read this menu or I want to go talk to this person. It's a great way to learn the language. I've got, of course, what I'm saying here is I have it in Japanese mode. But boy, could I not give any less of a fuck about like dungeon crawling, weird, like mythical. And of course, the language challenge ability when you're playing in Japanese goes from moderate intermediate skill level to really fucking hard in a hurry because now you're using all this mythological language that no one uses in everyday life and that I don't fucking know. So I am vexed. I would love for there to be RPGs like this that are just like, and then you went to the grocery store and you've got this big quest, the big quest of you've got a term paper in 3 months. Like I would fucking love, like the original Shenmue game is like one of my favorite games because like the climax is, and then you get on a forklift and then you have a day job for a few weeks. God, I would kill for something. If you know any games that kind of fit that mold that I could use for Japanese practice that don't end up having some stupid other, like, to quote unquote, make it interesting, like some big combat dungeon crawling scheme or something like that, let me know. Talking about games I fell off of really quick. Ninja Gaiden 2 Black was released. It was a sudden drop, like a Xbox Direct happened, and they're making Ninja Gaiden 4, and they're teaming up Team Ninja and Platinum. And if you know any of those things, like there's reason to be excited about that. But they just surprise dropped a remake, a remaster of Ninja Gaiden 2, which was an original Xbox game, I want to say. And I remember that game being really fucking hard. I remember my housemates in college, like, they beat that game. And I remember like looking at it and being like, that's not for me. I don't think I have the skills. I don't think I have the chops. It just looks too frustrating. It looks like the game is designed to be frustrating. It's like a fighting game and like all the ninjas are coming at you really fast. And like no amount of dodging and parrying is going to stop the fact that you got to be really aggressive, but also like manage your health. And every time you get hit, you're just fucked. Well, I downloaded it because I have Game Pass and it just came out. So I was like, I'll give it a shot. I gave it a shot. I didn't even get through the first fight. I was just like, you know what? Life's too short. I'm just not wired for this. So I recommend Ninja Gaiden 2 Black if you're a total sicko. Now you know what? We're running low on time. Let's check the mail and then just be done with this.
You've got mail.
Will wrote in a long ass time ago, and he sent like a list of questions. I didn't get to all of them. So every now and then when we have a light week, by the way, we have a light week because I have not been pushing the mailbag. Please, podcast@searles.co. Send me, I got pretty spicy here. Maybe you got something spicy to say. Give me your best. Will wrote in forever ago. I hope Will's still with us. It's dark. Will, check in. I need proof of life. He wrote, God, I'm a piece of shit. He wrote 37 Signals, Coinbase, and now seemingly Google. Do you have any spicy hot takes on the topic of, quote unquote, bringing your whole self to work? No, I've got pretty normal takes on that. I think that if you've got the privilege to bring your whole self to work, you are individually optimized or incentivized to do so. Like I am a cishet white dude who, when I act confidently in a room of people who don't know me, they think that is like a normal state of being. So like, yeah, I bring my whole self all the goddamn time and it's pretty fucking great. I don't, I've had people tell me to withhold some of that whole self at work to level the playing field. And if only that's how it worked, right? Like, don't worry. Okay, I'll be totally honest. I was just talked about, I brought a fake self to work all the time. I put on, what's the word that the allies like? Mask. I put on a mask to like make other people feel better about whatever their existence was. To a certain extent, but that's also like, like a less fancy way of saying that is just like, I was polite. I tried to be considerate while still getting my own needs met and still being authentic to who I am. Now, based on your individual story as a person, your identity, like systemic, facts of life, whether patriarchal or racist, like not everyone can bring their whole selves to work. Like it's just like, and the assumption that everyone must, or like an edict that's like, hey, you got to bring your whole self to work because we're all bought in. We're to use it as a proxy for intensity and like wanting to do your job sufficiently hard. That's bullshit, right? Certain number of people, they just show up to work and they're like, you mean nothing to me. You are not my family. I'm a goddamn operator and I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this job better than anyone else. And then I'm going to go home and you're going to pay me more than the person who's friendly because they suck at their job, right? That is a completely valid way to be, right? But we don't reward things that way typically. And it's really difficult because fundamentally, for the 50th time, I feel like I've had to say this, the reason for that in tech and in software specifically, and the reason it's not getting better and won't get better is no one fucking knows how to measure a good programmer from a bad programmer. And all of the systems that we've built and all of the organizations that we've designed are seemingly going in the opposite direction of rewarding all the wrong things. So like once we get to a point where we're really, really good at assessing this developer is effective and valuable and their ROI on their salary is X, once we get good at measuring that, then a lot of this sort of soft stuff of like these sort of like us, we're just chasing correlation. We're just like, well, people who are kind of like this tend to have good outcomes, we think, based on anecdata. I don't fucking know. So then we end up with these truisms like bring your whole self to work. That's like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, go to work and be really fucking good at your job and like make it clear to other people that you're really fucking good at your job. And when you're not good at your job, you can either, wallow in imposter syndrome or, pathologize it or whatever. Like by all means, float your boat, give yourself whatever story helps you sleep at night, especially if the job is safe. But like, or get fucking better at the job. Like those are your options. So that's a spicy hot take. Hopefully I still remember the definition of bring your whole self to work. That feels like more than a year ago. Prem writes in, if you like PT, that's playable trailer. That's a reference to a defunct PS4 trailer, that the game, mini game, free game thing that got pulled from the PS4 because the project got canceled. That was influenced in this new Indiana Jones game. There's a segment from the new Indiana Jones game that's just like it. You walk around a hallway a bunch of times. Each time it gets a little creepier and a little bit scarier. And you're in a big loop. That style of horror game. He says, if you like PT, you should try the Exit 8 and Platform 8. It's really similar, keeping you on your toes kind of horror game. All right, I'm already out. Where you're like, wait, did that thing that just change? Also, all right, so thank you, Prem. I appreciate and will disregard this recommendation from you because I hate horror games generally, and I only put up with like what I did in Indiana Jones because like it's mostly not a horror game, and I just wanted to see the ending. But I appreciate you. Prem continues. I'm wholeheartedly enjoying your discussion about games from Chinese studio. As I'm still using X, I guess I'm also using X now because I'm freshly syndicating properly to it. As I'm still using X and seeing ads for these games, these are just too much. Still make me sad that this kind of thing sells. Yep. Welcome to the show, Prem. You have a seat over here. It sounds like you are you're in the right place. Let's do Goodness gracious, I'm feeling tired. It's our we're gonna skate in that magical window of between 2.5 and 3 hours. Just how I like it. I don't know if you like it, but if you're still here, well. Jesse writes in about this was another oldie but a goodie, about an app that he likes called Tiller, or that they like called Tiller. I use Tiller. It's a personal finance app. I was complaining about Lunch Money or Copilot or something. Jesse writes, I use Tiller, which writes transactions from your financial accounts into a Google Sheet. All right, you lost me right there too. So he continues, there's an auto categorization tool that you can define rules for. You can edit those rules at any time, and it makes answering, quote, where did the money go, much easier to answer. And then he went on and said, Tiller doesn't have something, and I apparently cut off the rest of the email. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for writing in. I hope you write in again. I already replied to this email when I received it saying you lost me a Google Sheet because what's the point of quitting your day job if not to escape fucking Google Docs? Sorry. It's just like the UI is trash. Like the whole thing sucks. Like everything about Google's like they have no fucking taste. And if you're one of those people who like lives in Google Docs and Google Sheets and Google Forms and Google, does anyone live in Google Slides? Like, I guess if you full screen it and then you literally get lost in it, you might live in Google Slides. But like, these are like, it's bad software. The thing that makes it sticky, like if you purport to love it, what you probably love is like the real-time collaboration, the fact it's free, the fact that like everything's connected to everything, and like it's just you like its incumbency advantage or the capture that has occurred with the fact that it's like the same people who make your email and your corporate everything. And so as an integration point, it makes a lot of sense. And as path of least resistance, it makes a lot of sense. But like, man alive, you've never used it on a fucking iPad, that's for sure, or tried to change anything on a fucking phone. Like, good fucking Lord. If you use Google Sheets for fun, you have a seat over here, but like in a totally different sense. So Jesse, shout out to you. Thank you for the email. Sorry. I'm sure Tiller is really great. It's just like so many things, not for me.